Yeah, the Monday looms rather large here for all of us on the Newsroom show. It's been a good weekend. Some say a really bad weekend for South African rugby. That's why you see me in mourning this morning, Elvis.
Well, everybody, the whole country, and I can tell you that is in mourning. I mean, have you ever seen an adult cry on Saturday morning? When the Springboks
I lost a lot of time on Saturday morning watching the Springboks, and you know what? I'll never get it back. My children will never get back the time I lost the Springboks.
Anyhow, there's a lot of stories developing. Undoubtedly, I think the KPMG story is definitely the story of the weekend, and our first up focus is on the auditing firm who withdraw a report linking the former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and some SARS employees to this alleged rogue unit that's now been plaguing that organisation for years, really.
No, they also accuse of facilitating tax evasion and money laundering and all sorts of things, Eben, that obviously relates to this particular story. Lots of people's lives were destroyed.
Yeah, absolutely. We put it to the poll. What are you guys saying? We put it to the poll.
What I find out from you, should KPMG be prosecuted for unethical business practices? Straight up,
Kendall.
251 votes have come in already. 96% say absolutely they should be prosecuted.
Well, there's only 4%, and I can guarantee you that's probably the KPMG staff that's suggesting that they should not be prosecuted.
Yeah.
But this is what you are telling us. Uncle Jay says, yes, they should be prosecuted, and all audits done by them should be re-audited by uncaptured firms.
Interesting one. This one from the big M, Michael. He told us, yes, and they must be fined a hefty fine because they're just one of many companies in the country that think they can do as they please. And it's hashtag white monopoly capital. WMC, yes, he talks about, well, this prevailing corporate gangsterism, collusion, price fixing, all these things that are happening unabated in the business sector, Elvis.
Unbelievable story. We'll follow up on that story in a short while. Also, we'll speak to some of the role players and an affected SARS employee, former spokesperson at SARS.
Yeah, we'll be talking to him shortly. But Kendall, we're also asking a question today around our theme. We're dealing with the bystander effect. People are just filming others when they get hurt, so we put this question forward.
Absolutely. It's been coming for some time since the advent of social media. We want to find out from you, what do you do when you see someone being attacked? Do you, A, turn the other way, or do you mind your own business or save the day?
Will you intervene when you see someone being attacked on the street? Are you that person?
Yes, you've seen a lot of these incidents happening, people being attacked right in front of you and people turn a blind eye. Michael Big M says yes, and that's how most of us were brought up. But unfortunately, people change once in the big cities, and they would stand by, watch and record a video. Unbelievable.
Then Mahafa comes in with his, I'll intervene if the attacker is not carrying dangerous weapons or threaten to call the police or mob justice.
Yeah, we have to, in a way, all be activists if we want our country to move forward. That's just the way it is. Of course, the Springboks moved our country backwards this weekend.
They haven't been that active.
No, they haven't. They're definitely not on the scoreboard. And there they are, looking forlorn, woeful, and very sad for themselves. And I want to find out from you, after this weekend's drubbing, 57-0, what do you make?
Alistair Kutsia said after the game there was some points to be worked on. But he scored no points, man.
None whatsoever.
Apparently they never left the hotel room. And they played roll ball when they did get there. Aldo van Rensburg says, Springboks, stop experimenting on international level. Coach and play the Springbok rugby the way we know it.
There we go.
Mondlima is our punch, says, I forgive them as they were beaten by a team with quality players. 57-0. What's
57-0, yep. Our backline couldn't get away of us because the ball was rolling on the carpet. Anyhow, yeah, we have to take a defeat. Take it on the chin, we move on. What do you think? What's the way back for us? It's going to be a long way back, but hopefully soon the Springboks will put one over the Aussies and we all feel a little bit better. There's also a return match, Kendall.
Yes.
But let's get down to business. A Golden Arrow bus has been set alight during a taxi strike in Delft in Cape Town. We'll go there live to that story shortly. The South African Revenue Service is today expected to brief the media on the withdrawal of the SARS report by KPMG. Another focus here today. And the Gauteng government has admitted that not enough action is being taken to end the ongoing turf war between Uber and meter taxi operators. Now, those are all your headlines. But before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the rollball field.
On the rollball field. I love it. I suppose that's the way it's going to be for the entire week, you know, ragging on the Springboks and how badly they performed over the weekend. It's sad, you know, it's times like this when I wish I didn't have to do what I need to do.
It's okay, I'll help you at 9:50. We'll talk about it a little bit. Give you a little bit of therapy later.
No, thank you. I think I'm going to need that. I think most of you at home will go. We need a little bit of therapy after the weekend. This is what we're bringing for you in the sports today. Good morning. The Springboks come back from Auckland after sinking to a new all-time low as they failed to register even a single point in a humiliating 57-0 training session for the All Blacks.
Yeah, it doesn't push us back at all. In my book, it's still a massive progression. If you look like this is the only test we've lost so far, you know.
Defending champions Mamelodi Sundowns grab all 3 points in their first leg CAF Champions League quarter-final as they beat Wydad Casablanca 1-0 in Atteridgeville. And tennis in South Africa makes great strides as the Davis Cup team beats Denmark 3-1 to gain promotion to Euro-Africa Group 1.
Brilliant for South Africa. Lloyd Harris comes up with the goods in the fourth set. Look.
And it's lights out, away we go. Verstappen gets an excellent start. Sebastian Vettel will need to cover him off. Kimi Raikkonen on the inside, and he's crashed with Verstappen. He's hit Vettel as well. Raikkonen is out.
Lewis Hamilton, starting in 5th place, comes out unscathed in the first lap carnage, which takes on Vettel, Verstappen and Raikkonen to win and extend his championship lead to 28 points.
Hamilton wins in Singapore and is 28 points clear at the top of the championship. Ferrari's pain, Hamilton's gain.
All this and more I'll have for you later on, but do remember, even and I, 9:45, 9:50, we talk Springboks and what's the way back. But stick with Elvis as he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. I'm not too sure if that Hamilton win was a setup if you look at the start of that race. But another question that I would like to pose, of course, to the Springbok coaches, define massive progression for me. We'll talk about that later with Eben and Kendall. But now, top story this hour. A Golden Arrow bus has been set alight in Delft. Several buses in Khayelitsha on the Cape Flats have also been stoned. Commuters have been left stranded, with some say they are too scared to use buses and cannot use taxis because they are on strike. Meanwhile, several Pretoria taxi associations have distanced themselves from the planned illegal march to the union buildings by taxi drivers today. The drivers want government to scrap all their traffic fines. The protest follows a similar one last month and is expected to affect taxi operations in areas such as Atteridgeville, Hammanskraal, Soshanguve and Mamelodi. However, some taxi associations, including Santaco and Mawikta, are not in support of the march and have promised that their taxis will operate today. Now, for an update on the taxi strike that's happening in Cape Town, we are joined by our reporter, Vanessa Puna, who is in Nyanga in Cape Town, where commuters are stranded. A very good morning to you, Vanessa, and welcome. Can you give us the latest from where you are right now?
Yes, good morning to you. Here on Governor Mbeki Drive between Philippi and Nyanga, the situation is volatile. We've seen quite a number of delivery vehicles being stoned. Behind me also there is a police presence with police people assisting where drivers have asked them to please escort them through Governor Mbeki Road. If I can just step out of shot for a short minute, you'll see in the distance that of course the smoke billowing behind me, that of course is a dairy truck which have a short while ago it's been looted, and then shortly after that it's also been set alight. I'm not quite sure exactly what the situation is like there at the moment. I heard a couple of loud bangs as police made their way to that area, people making off with goods from that delivery vehicle. It would appear as though opportunistic elements are cashing in on today's illegal taxi strike. All since this morning, since 5 o'clock this morning from Khayelitsha, we've seen buses stoned, hundreds if not thousands of commuters left stranded, and then also a short while ago in Delft where a Golden Arrow bus has been set alight. Now I take it the information coming through is that the My City buses have not been cancelled. They are still operational, but for at least a few hours this morning during the peak traffic time, buses of course full to capacity as commuters who are struggling to get to work this morning in light of no taxis have crammed into buses. We've got scores and scores of people lining the road roads here, even in Governor Mbeki Road as well. Curious onlookers and bylookers waiting to see exactly what has been taking place. But I can tell you that the smoke billowing behind me right now is, of course, that delivery vehicle that has been set alight. And in the foreground here, we have police keeping a close watch on what has happened. Also, a number of, or shards of glass rather, on the roadway, if I can show you, a construction vehicle also parked over here, which has been stoned. We've spoken to some of the drivers saying that they too are fearing for their lives. They're not sure whether they must continue with deliveries, many of them having asked the police for an escort just to get through to where they need to be. So the situation here, volatile in pockets in this part of Cape Town this morning. I've also read reports of other areas like Dunoon and so on, where there have been sporadic incidents, as well as at Borchards Quarry along the N2. Also reports of stonings happening as this illegal taxi strike is underway here in Cape Town.
Just briefly, Vanessa, have you spoken to some of the striking taxi drivers, and what are their demands?
Look, the drivers are not wanting to go on camera. They are saying that their leadership will address, or rather address a meeting. I think that was scheduled to take place. It started 15 minutes ago, if it is on time. But what we are hearing from them is that they are aggrieved because of impounding of their taxis. They are saying that the new taxi laws discriminate against them. And they are also not happy with the election process for the South African National Taxi Council. So these are some of the issues that we are hearing on the ground from taxi drivers and owners, but they're not prepared to go on camera to speak to us, to explain to us exactly why they've decided to down tools today.
Thank you, Vanessa. That's our reporter, Vanessa Puna, coming to us live from Nyanga in Cape Town, where commuters have been left stranded. Meanwhile, the Gauteng government has acknowledged that the number of arrests made in the ongoing turf war between Uber and the meter taxi operators is worryingly low. Over 160 cases have been opened with police and only 28 suspects have been arrested. No one has been convicted. Violence between the two transport service providers has increased in the recent months, resulting in the death of an Uber driver in Pretoria. Meanwhile, a man accused of burning an Uber driver with acid is expected to appear in the Roodepoort Magistrates Court. Komotso Tiro allegedly had acid poured on him by a cash client who he picked up in Northcliffe. The attack resulted in severe burns to his face, neck and hands. Gauteng Premier David Makura says that the national government has been roped in to assist in tackling the violence. The Gauteng Transport Department will soon launch a campaign to expedite the processing of the applications for operating permits for Uber as well as meter taxi drivers. Meter taxi drivers had often complained that Uber operators were not licensed to operate, but the department says out of the 2,900 meter taxis operating in the province, only 500 have permits. It says it's so far issued more than 600 licenses to Uber operators.
If we don't clamp down on this, we will have another form of killings that are carried out by hired assassins. The history of taxi violence is that the corridor the taxi violence has always had was the Gauteng-KwaZulu-Natal corridor. The same people hired by the taxi people to kill. It's the same people who are hired to carry out politically inspired murders in KwaZulu-Natal.
Well, that's your news for now. Now, today the focus is on the South African Revenue Service. They're expected to brief the media a little bit later, but we're also conducting a poll on the KPMG report that has been retracted. Now, should KPMG be prosecuted for unethical business practices? That's what we are posing to you today. Hashtag SABC News, KPMG, State Capture, Gupta emails, and KPMG Bloodbath. 291 votes in Eben. 95% of our viewers in South Africa and the African continent are suggesting that they should be prosecuted. Only 5%, which I suspect comes from KPMG, are saying no.
The numbers are pretty overwhelming, and of course KPMG, they're starting to put things out in the media as to what kind of remedial action they're going to take. Interesting, of course, obviously, is that the South African Revenue Services is today expected to brief the media on the withdrawal of the SARS report by KPMG. Now, the auditing firm have come under fire after it was accused of facilitating tax evasion, money laundering and corruption by giving Gupta-linked entities clean audits. The firm has since admitted shortcomings in reference to these particular audits. KPMG South Africa has since apologized for its role in the SARS rogue unit saga. Now the company announced drastic changes to its top structure as it battles to save itself from the consequences of doing business with the Gupta family. Among the changes include the resignation of the CEO as well as 8 other officials. KPMG said it would donate the 40 million rand it earned in fees from Gupta-controlled firms to charity and refund 23 million rand it earned compiling a controversial report for the South African Tax Service. The auditing firm has also withdrawn a report on the so-called rogue unit at SARS. The report raised questions about the leadership of Pravin Gordhan when he was the SARS commissioner, as well as other tax officials. Meanwhile, KPMG's new CEO, Nhlamulu Dlomo, has acknowledged the company's mistake in the SARS rogue unit report. Dlomo says they are also looking forward to engaging with former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. Well, we have to apologize for that clip. We'll try and play it for you as soon as it comes in. Try and look back at what she said about an engagement with Pravin Gordhan. But remaining with KPMG's rescinded report on SARS, the former SARS spokesperson, Adrian Lackay, has now confirmed that Pravin Gordhan and other former colleagues are seeking legal advice after KPMG withdrew its report linking them to this alleged rogue unit within the South African Revenue Service. The auditing firm announced sweeping changes at senior management and allowed key senior partners to leave after damning findings of an internal investigation into work done for the Guptas. The KPMG internal report follows the story of a rogue unit operating within the Revenue Service here in South Africa that carried out a series of illegal spook operations, spied on President Jacob Zuma, ran a brothel, illegally bought spyware, and entered into unlawful tax settlements. Now, as a result, many of SARS's top management were forced to resign. Now, joining us live from Pretoria, one of those affected and who was also named in the now discredited KPMG report, the former SARS spokesperson, Adrian Lackay, joins us live from the capital. He's in our studios in Pretoria this morning. A very good morning to you, Adrian. Thank you for being with us here on Newsroom.
Good morning, Eben. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this program.
Your assessment with this withdrawal of this report, linking yourself, former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, and then several others in this to the alleged rogue unit within SARS. Just what's your assessment today?
I think it was a good initial first step by KPMG and the new management on Friday to firstly apologize to Mr. Pravin Gordhan, the former Finance Minister, and secondly to effectively withdraw many of the findings that they've made regarding SARS, the alleged rogue unit that ostensibly operated there, and the findings they've made in their forensic report to SARS dating back to the end of 2015. But on the other hand, I think more concrete steps should now follow to try and fix some of the damage that has been done to people and their careers and their reputations. Because in their forensic report to SARS, KPMG was very explicit. It stated unequivocally that there was a rogue covert intelligence unit that operated in SARS, that Mr. Ivan Pillay, the former Deputy Commissioner of SARS, established this unit. They reported to him, he was at all times aware of the activities, that they spied on taxpayers illegally, and that they spent more than 540 million rand on acquiring equipment to be used for unlawful activities. And this constitutes irregular, fruitless and wasteful and possibly illegal expenditure. It also recommends criminal charges must follow and disciplinary steps. And we know now that this report was the basis of actions taken against a number of SARS officials, and ultimately the criminal prosecution of Mr. Pillay, Mr. Pravin Gordhan, and Oupa Magashula, the former SARS commissioner, in October 2016, which charges were subsequently withdrawn by the National Director for Public Prosecutions. So KPMG and its activities and conduct lies central to what events transpired last year.
Is it your contention then that this report was a political tool as a way and means to frustrate those who are fighting against state capture?
I agree with Mr. Gordon, who since Friday argues that this was one of the attempts to take over the well-functioning state institution that did its work independently in fighting corruption, in making sure the levels of tax compliance in the country improve, and to ensure that adequate resources are provided for our fiscus through tax revenue and tax collection. And SARS was a model public institution. It played a significant role to combat corruption and to expose abuses in the public finance system. And I think if we reflect back on what happened throughout 2016, many people played politics. I think the ultimate target has always been Mr. Pravin Gordhan in his portfolio as Minister of Finance until March this year. And then we saw, firstly, a very public display by Mr. Shaun Abrams announcing he will issue summons against those 3 individuals I've mentioned, and then 2 weeks or so later withdrawing those charges. But even at his media briefing at the end of October 2016, when Mr. Abrams withdraws the summons and the charges, for the first part of his media briefing, he still hammers on the existence of this rogue unit and perpetuates all the allegations that, in fact, it actually existed. In fact, there may be cause for further investigation and so on. And in the same way, the Hawks conduct themselves to this day, indicating still to the public, but investigations continue. So no one has concretely put a stop to this, to say it was nonsense, to admit that investigative processes were manipulated, to admit that big corporates like KPMG, like other law enforcement agencies, were directed to act and to find in a certain way against certain individuals. And if we can get those admissions and the true facts, I think that is owed to the South African public and taxpayers.
Do you think KPMG will now come clean and come up with names, as you say? And secondly, do you feel exonerated? And also, you talked about reparations. What do you think that those kind of reparations to the individuals should be like?
Look, this was never about any one individual amongst us. Many people suffered tremendous harm in this process. The top management, the exco of SARS, effectively, people either resigned or the structure was disbanded. A whole institution suffered reputational damage. People lost their jobs. Some of them are still facing criminal or disciplinary charges. They have to defend themselves against those. They incur legal costs. They have to pay for it themselves. And they've lost prospects of future employment. Certainly in the case of Mr. Ivan Pillay, Johan van Logrenberg, Yolisa Piquet, Piet Richer, who were all senior officials who served and helped build a public institution. Some stayed with SARS for more than 28 years. So those people's careers were destroyed. They suffered financial losses. Their families are traumatized, and they need a proper and a more concrete form of justice than just a public admission that I will return the fees that I got from SARS. There must be a better outcome for them. So hopefully there can be some efforts to engage. Certainly Mr. Gordhan, certainly Mr. Pillay and others who were directly affected by KPMG's findings, and to give them a platform to be heard. Because from 2015, when these investigations were done, those affected by the findings were never given a fair, reasonable and proper opportunity to answer the allegations against them or to make submissions to KPMG and its investigative team about the allegations and putting documentary evidence to refute that. So if voices can now be heard, if there can be a more constructive engagement with those affected, it would be a positive step.
You talk about that steps, but you also talk about the fact that you guys are taking legal advice. What is that process of taking legal advice? And when you talk about that, what is the context it exists in within the next steps?
Since Friday, I've been speaking to a number of the former SARS colleagues, including Mr. Gordon. They are individually talking to their lawyers to try and identify an appropriate legal means or legal action for them to, one, protect their rights, but also to find some form of justice, if you wish, and compensation if that needs to be the end game. Knowing that if you take on big institutions like the Revenue Service or a big corporate like KPMG, litigation is expensive, it takes time, it's stressful, and within those considerations, I think as a group, those individuals will come up with, obviously guided by sound legal advice, as to what would be the correct course of action to ensure that, firstly, their reputations are restored, secondly, that there's some form of compensation, and ultimately that there can be a measure for them to clear their names in the public domain.
Adrian, thank you for joining us today. Adrian Lackay is the former spokesperson of SARS, and of course we spoke at length now about the discredited KPMG report, SARS report that is. We're asking you, what should happen? You guys are voting on a poll. Should KPMG now be prosecuted for unethical business practice? It seems we talk a lot about unethical business practice in South Africa these days. 311 of you have voted, and you guys are saying overwhelmingly yes. But what are you guys tweeting us? This one from Hafanol, he says, yes, KPMG should be prosecuted to deter future unethical business practice in South Africa. It will send a strong message to other businesses. Yeah, examples need to be made, Mahafa. Mondley tweets us, absolutely. SA economy is downgraded to junk status, and KPMG must be banned to do forensic reports for the government and its entities. Tough action is what people are calling for. This one from Tabisa, he says, they must be removed from our system, just like what the UK did to Bell Pottinger. Very, very tough measures are being mooted here. We're going to leave the KPMG report there for now. You can come back a little bit later and we'll give you those updates again. You can also watch it live when we put it on our website as well as on our YouTube live streaming facility. But let's go over to Elvis now for more.
Thank you, Yeb. And of course, it's an ongoing discussion, and that's what we're going to have right here now. As you know, the nominations for the next ANC leadership have officially been opened for branches in at least 6 provinces. ANC Secretary-General Gwede Mantashe says that the party has concluded the branch audits for Limpopo, Gauteng, Northern Cape, Free State and Mpumalanga, as well as the Northwest. At least 7 party leaders are contesting the party's presidency, with the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, and NEC member Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma widely seen as front-runners. Other presidential hopefuls include the Treasurer-General, Zweli Mkhize, the NEC member Lindiwe Sisulu, former Treasurer-General Matthew Spoza, Speaker Baleka Mbete, and Party Head of Policy Jeff Radebe. Now, one of those ANC presidential hopefuls, former ANC Treasurer-General Matthew Spoza, now joins us in studio. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning, sir. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us here this morning. Now, you saw the story that we were just running now on KPMG. Is there a link between the discredited report of KPMG as well as what we've seen happening in the country? The finance minister, of course, lost his job as well as his deputy, other SARS employees. Is that a link to state capture, you think?
Well, I think it's a matter for investigation. Yeah, but it's unfortunate that the integrities of so many people have been impeached by false and fake report. And I hold Mr. Pravin Gordhan and many of those officials in high regard. Ivan Pillay were together, all of us in exile, very good civil servants. I think there must be remedial action immediately from KPMG side. And there must be action against KPMG, which is very decisive, and send a lesson to everyone in business that unethical behavior should not be tolerated, and to everyone in public service. Now, I want to go back to your introduction. There are no front runners in this race. We're all comrades, having equal chance of winning that race. It's you creating a feature, a phantom of front runners. These are all comrades running on the same level playing field.
Now, the SG called this a stampede with so many members running for that position. Is that your contention, that it is a stampede, or should it be more manageable?
I think the SG must be much more economic with words. I would say so, because it's the democratic rights, all those comrades, including myself, to run for that position. And they're all members of the ANC in good standing. Let's leave the sensational words and descriptions, please. Let's be calm.
Let's take a look at your contention. You are running as the ANC president in December. What makes you the #1 contender, you think?
Well, I think that the branches of the ANC will determine who is, one, the #1 contender, #2, who is the better person amongst us to run the organization. It's their call, and must respect the voices of the branch of the ANC. Not what we saw in Mpumalanga over the weekend, chairpersons of provinces saying they will determine who must lead the ANC. They don't have such right. It's only the branch of the ANC who have the right to determine who is the best person to lead the ANC and therefore the country. I think we should present the issues that affect people's lives daily. The issue is the ANC itself is facing a low level of trust. We need to restore that quickly by cleaning the branches of the ANC, removing the corruption in there, focusing on political education so that our members don't focus time on tenders and corruption. They focus on how to build society, how to support communities, how to ensure that service delivery take place, and be concerned and raise those issues. There's an issue of government which is very corrupt, from president going down. We need to clean that type of situation and say, what should a president of the ANC look like in future? Seriously, where you breach your oath of office, for me, you're not my plate of president. To me, you're not my plate of NEC when you say you take collective responsibility. The ANC must restructure itself, restructure government, lean and mean. We've got 2 junk status.
Yes.
We're facing the 3rd one. We need to restore confidence in our economy so that the world sees us as an investment destination and therefore create jobs and be able to deliver services, which is my point.
Now, talking about the branches, it seems like there's not a lot of traction within the branches for invitations for you to speak, but you have a lot of traction on saving the ANC movement that has gained traction within the churches. How does that make you feel that there's not a connection between the branches?
I think you're not informed at all. So it's difficult to talk to someone who's not informed. Every weekend, every day, I address branches of the ANC, not of the PAC, in their hundreds, and I'm very excited. Come, the facts will prove themselves. Let's not talk too much.
If you are the contender, and as you say, that it's an open call really for all the members.
It's an open call.
But it seems like there is 2 front contenders.
It doesn't seem like that. The media invented it. You just invented it. It's not based on the branch calculations. You can only say so if you've calculated the branches that have nominated those people who are talking front runners. We dispute it, all of us. The branches will speak. And not the chairpersons of provinces, not the media. The branches will speak.
If you were to be elected as the ANC president in December, what will be your first point of call and what will you change to create unity within a fractionalized ANC?
Well, I think it's very important that we go back to the basis of what the ANC is. The ANC is an organization of the people. And therefore, you should not only talk to the ANC and talk to itself. There are many fractures which happen. It's not only now with the ANC. You got COPE came from the ANC, UDM from the ANC, EFF from the ANC. Bring back all those forces, the democratic forces, into one stable and have a broad front of progressive forces forming a very progressive ANC, right? ANC-led. But there are issues they will raise, and we must respect those issues. And so what are the minimum platforms? They will say no corruption, no nuclear whatever, no nonsense, serious fight against crime, and you must listen and engage and form a united ANC. A ANC which respects churches, which respects chiefs, traditional leaders, labor, and organs of civil society will be more uniting. And ANC does accept that South Africa belongs to all of us, indeed, not only in words, and give every South African hope.
It seems like there's a number of court cases currently with the different branches of the African National Congress. Now, we heard the Pietermaritzburg High Court, of course, declared the 2015 elective conference in KZN invalid. We've also seen the situation in the Northwest, in the Northern Cape, rather. And these are the issues that's currently happening. How will you deal with that as an ANC president? And do you think that that is enough, or perhaps the camel, or the feather that broke the camel back before the elective conference in December?
Let me tell you, let's start where we started. These manifestations indicate that the ANC itself does not respect its own constitution. But the issues being raised in court is, ANC, you didn't follow your own constitution. Just like the Constitutional Court said, Mr. President, you didn't follow your constitution. So this tendency of disrespecting your own constitution, which you wrote, needs to come to an end. I'll make sure that we respect our own constitution. Two, I just think the leadership must take decisive action and resolve these issues and make sure that the December conference goes ahead as planned. It will be unfortunate because some of the guys who want to lead beyond December will be ultra vires. You know, the time and the constitution of the ANC. We must stick to the constitution. December must bring that conference and let's have it.
Mr. Posa, unity before the elective conference and even within the tripartite alliance, is that even possible with the elective conference around the corner?
It's not possible because leadership which is there must take responsibility. It's not possible. And the conference must liberate the ANC from this crisis, from the corruption, from all these things that has made our people to lose trust in us. Must restore the faith of our people in the ANC. It can't claim to be leader of society when it does not deserve to lead.
Your message for the voters out there for the elective conference in December, for yourself as the president?
Let us unite the ANC. Let us elect leaders who are corruption-less and who are fearless and who will deliver services to the people, not to themselves, their families, and their friends.
Sir, I thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
That was the former ANC Treasurer General of the African National Congress, Matthew Posa. Well, what do you make of that? You can also let us know. But right now, we're going to take a short break. In fact, we're going to go straight over to Eben because we're talking about all the issues that's currently happening today and the trends that's happening on social media. Let's go over to Eben.
Yeah, thanks, Elvis. It's Monday morning. Very good morning, Chief. You've just joined us, of course. It always seems as if there's a little bit of a hangover, isn't there, from the weekend. Let's go into social media quickly and see what you can see there, and which are, of course, the big talking points and points of concern this morning. The big one in the capital as well as in Cape Town is the hashtag taxi strike. Yes, drivers are taking to the streets in Pretoria and in Cape Town to demand that their traffic fines be squashed and that impounded vehicles be given back to the owners. Now, members of taxi unions will then march to the union buildings to hand over memorandum, they say. How can we get away from this one? Yeah, rugby fans reeling from the devastating Springbok game against New Zealand. The All Blacks at the weekend, yeah, gave us a hammering. 57-0 has been described as the worst in more than 100 years. The hashtag, of course, is Box, and no doubt that you're all still feeling a little bit, well, hungover is probably the word after that eating. Then, as you saw a little bit earlier, yeah, on the show with that interview that I did with Adrian Lackay, the spotlight is still very much on auditing firm KPMG after it was accused of facilitating tax evasion, money laundering and corruption by giving Gupta-linked entities clean audits. The hashtag on screen there, have a look at it. Then the South African movie, Kalushi, aired last night on SABC, one after much anticipation, and is topping the trends this morning. Wonderful story, of course, about one of the great freedom fighters here in the history of South Africa. Then, moving on, 68 people were rescued off a sinking ferry in Table Bay. Rescue operations were pleased with the handling of the incidents, they say. Robben Island is the hashtag, and that's Robin with an E, in case you're wondering we can't spell. Then, Durban, heavy winds caused major damage to infrastructure, causing trees to fall, damaging some cars and property there in the city. That is Durban. Massive winds, yeah, hitting the city, causing all kinds of mayhem. Now for our picture of the day. This one comes from Mervyn Pillay, and it's captioned, look at the damage. KZN South Coast, hit by heavy gale force winds. Yeah, cars turned over. At the time he said stay indoors, but lots of damage, and the city's counting the cost there this morning. The comment of the day. Yeah, it comes from Truth, and it's always the same after we get a hiding on the rugby field. And he says, it's not about black players or white players. The very presence of politics in sport is a burden for all of us. It's a poison, and he says, something we need to overcome collectively. Talking about, of course, the box, and all the conversation on my feed this weekend was quotas and. I'm sure you all get a little bit tired of it. Talk to Kendall about that a little bit later. Now, it's a busy day in the courts. Yeah, Monday, the court is full. Let's take a look at what you can get done in the Western Cape, where a 31-year-old man is expected to appear in the Blue Downs Magistrates Court on charges of murder and theft of a motor vehicle. He was arrested in connection with the murder of the son of former Springbok Henny Muller Now, the body of the 64-year-old Stephen Miller was found in his house in Frederhoek on Friday morning. It's believed that he was attacked with an axe. Then in the Eastern Cape, a 32-year-old man is expected to appear in the Butterworth Magistrates Court for an alleged car hijacking. Now, so the alleged suspect got a lift from the car's owner from the Zitulele township in the early hours of the morning. He then allegedly forced the man out of the car. Then, moving to the East Rand here in Johannesburg, the 43-year-old man accused of murdering an Eskom employee, Tembisi Leyende, is expected in the Magistrates Court in Springs. Now, David Ngwenya was arrested in Carltonville in June of this year. Yende's decomposing body was found in an office at an Eskom plant in Southcourt Springs after she'd been missing for just over 2 weeks. Now, a black plastic bag was wrapped around her head. Then, outside Pretoria, a 48-year-old man is expected to appear in the Moretele Magistrates Court in Temba near Hammanskraal on a rape charge. He's alleged that the man kidnapped and raped a 14-year-old teenager. Now, police spokesperson Herman Moremi says that they found the victim locked inside a shack. The suspect was then arrested through community assistance. That's the good news. Keep you updated on those and more as they develop here today. Now, tomorrow we'll be looking at the Fees Commission. Yeah, free education. It seems to be tensions are simmering once again. President Jacob Zuma's delay in releasing the Heifer Commission report on the feasibility of free higher education has left tertiary students worried that institutions could increase fees next year, and the murmurs are already starting on the campuses. So we'll deal with that tomorrow. Tell us what you think about it. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, talk about something that I'm quite passionate about, the bystander effect. Yes, that's the question today. If somebody comes and they attack someone in your line of sight, yeah, anywhere, in the streets, in a mall, whatever, rob them, would you intervene when you see someone being attacked? It's called the bystander effect if you do nothing and just take a picture or a video. After the break, I'll talk at length about that.
An exciting opportunity and an absolute must for those with the spirit of adventure is a Kruger Park night game drive.
The railway station itself is already a sight to behold and offers gracious colonial-style buildings and serves as the departure and arrival point for all train journeys.
I wanted to dress with my best color. Being awarded to do the Serpentine Pavilion is the highest commission in my career. And I wanted just to come and show me with my best clothes, and that is blue.
Catch Trends Travel every Sunday from 12 to 1 for all the global travel and leisure trends.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
From bullying to schoolboys beating up their female classmates, teachers abusing their pupils, to nightclub brawls and street muggings. In the past month, it seems that we have been privy to all. But why is our first instinct to pull out our cell phone instead of intervening and maybe saving a life? Psychological studies describe this phenomenon as the bystander effect, which explains that individuals are less likely to offer help to a victim when other people are present, assuming that others are responsible for taking action. So when is the right time to intervene?
Good question. 16th century philosopher once said the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And today, this concept still rings very true. Have you ever watched a fight? A woman being hit by a partner, a racist creating a public scene, a nasty road rage incident, a mugging. And did you do nothing about it? It's all too easy not to get involved in someone else's business, as we call it here in South Africa, isn't it? Especially when good intentions may cost you your life. Now, joining us in studios, clinical psychologist, Lizelle Douay. Very good morning to you, Lizelle.
Thank you for having me.
It's certainly very concerning when we see the rise of the kind of imagery that seems to be all too familiar at the moment. Talk to this bystander effect, what it is and how it's come about in developing.
Well, certainly very disconcerting. Even I would have to agree. I think how it's essentially started being noticed or documented is the very fact it goes back to the actual definition, which speaks to the fact that people have two choices in this. They can either intervene or they can be apathetic. And typically when people present with apathy towards the situation, it is their choice to not intervene. And what scientific studies have started showing us is that the more people there are, in terms of observing, the less likely they are to actually intervene and get involved.
Wow, that's shocking, actually. So what you're telling me is that there's this diffusion of responsibility in a way, and people are more and more like sheep waiting for leadership.
Absolutely. It's almost as though, as the video rightfully said, that there's this tendency to almost intervene by virtue of first taking out your camera and capturing it for some bizarre reason or another, rather than taking the plunge and actually doing something about it yourself. Of course, that would be very strongly dependent on the nature of the actual crisis or emergency.
Now, have we become really selfish, or we live in a kind of society, I suppose, it's none of my business? I mean, that's what I hear a lot, it's none of my business. Or are we as human beings losing our humanity a little bit?
Maybe to some extent a little bit of both, even, I would say. And if I zoom in on the South African context in particular, we have come a little bit almost, again, apathetic to the idea because of the fact that it's become quite normal. So hijacking, smash and grab, even violent assault has become pretty much at the order of the day. It's not such a big deal anymore. In fact, it's almost as though you walk away from that situation having to feel grateful that at least you didn't lose your life. And with that sense of normality comes a sense of being almost accepting of it. And it sounds bizarre, but it is actually starting to happen gradually more with time.
What does it mean for our society at large? A little bit the idea that we are not as united, the idea that social cohesion is under pressure?
It's quite interesting, even if you think about the fact that as South Africans we're known to kind of project what we call the Ubuntu effect, or the sense that we are cohesive. But the danger in that lies in the fact that the more we kind of like group together, we lose our identities individually. So if we are in a group setting, as you would have rightfully seen on the footage as well, there's almost a sense of abdicating responsibility and saying, well, I don't necessarily have to get involved myself, someone else can do it. So as long as there's a possibility of someone else being able to do something, why should I personally? And especially it comes back to the fact that crime in this country is it's very violent. It's extremely violent,
and quite often people are their lives are threatened and weapons are involved and so forth. So that in itself changes the game completely. But we're obviously not unique. It's something that I think is kind of growing around the world, isn't it?
Not just that, but it's also started receiving, I would say, scientific and academic and intellectual attention, really only significantly so towards the late 1960s, when there started being a recognition of this notion of people to take a bit of a back step in the presence of other people, which is, again, it's quite contradictory because you almost would have expected the opposite, you know. So it is becoming more so, and I noticed that there's almost a contradictory effect in the sense that the more prominent it becomes, the more likely we are to whip out the cell phones and take the videos rather than just actually intervene.
Are there any studies out there that tells us that this kind of behavior or this kind of mindset can be changed?
There are, but most of the studies actually emanate very much so from social psychology in particular. And what this tells us is that the likelihood for people to actually step in and intervene depends on a number of things. I think first and foremost on the nature of the incident. So as you can imagine, Eben, I think a situation where someone is, for example, littering or drawing graffiti is very different to a woman being assaulted publicly, right? And so the nature of the actual incident would to a large extent determine whether someone gets involved. Secondly, also whether the perpetrators are there. And then lastly, also whether there's personal implication. So if I'm likely to get beaten over the head as well for intervening, then I'm likely to step back and not.
Transformation, is it possible, and what does that process kind of look like?
I think, again, it would have to start individually with just a sense of consciousness that we, in as much as we group together and we cluster together under this unity and social cohesion of Ubuntu-ness, that at the end of the day, we are still individually responsible for even the choice of not doing something. Interestingly enough, that still remains a choice. And so we need to start making our fellow brothers and sisters aware that we are equally held responsible for, increased crime rates and assault rates. And once we see those type of statistics reflected, it actually is an indication of our own responsibility towards that. So a little bit of self-reflection, to make a long story short.
Self-reflection and maybe a little bit of activism with amongst ourselves. So you're saying to me that in order for us to become a little bit better, we need to be activists in our own world, or the world that we want to create.
Right. But it doesn't just help to become activist around the 16 days of activism or during Women's Month or so. It's a consistent, or it should be a consistent, continuous discourse that happens every single day.
Well, Lizelle, it's fantastic. It's fascinating to talk to you about this. I really enjoyed that. We're going to talk to the police a little bit later, and they're going to give people advice what not to do and what to do. But thank you very much. Lizelle Douay, she's a clinical psychologist, and talking to us here on the Newsroom show about the bystander effect. Don't just stand there. You have the power to do something. And if your friends don't want to do something, you should hold them to account. That's what she tells us. We should all be activists. We should all do a little bit better. But time now for us to go onto our Facebook page to tell you what you can interact with there. There's a lot of news, of course, on a Monday, as it is. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on Eastern Cape delegates to elect leaders who put the country's interests ahead of their own. Ramaphosa says the time where leaders enrich themselves and certain families must now come to an end. Then the Gauteng government has acknowledged that the number of arrests made in the ongoing turf war between Uber and metered taxis, well, that's worryingly low. And finally, the 43-year-old man accused of murder at Eskom, remember, Tembisi Leyende? He'll appear in the Springs Magistrates Court today. David Ngwenya was arrested in Carltonville in June. All of that and more on our Facebook page. Now, time for us to talk a little bit of rugby. Kendall is here. He's got a broken heart, and I'm sure so does many of us here in South Africa. The Springboks took a beating, didn't they?
Yeah, broken heart actually is quite apt, because I was expecting a whole lot more. We had a massive chat about it on Friday about how I was hopeful that they might actually be competitive, but they were not even there. People talking about how they didn't even rock up, didn't even leave the hotel room. It was dismal. It was absolutely dismal, an abysmal and shocker of a result. 57-0 against the All Blacks, not even putting a single point on the board. I don't even know where to start, Eben, from the players to the entire coaching staff, not just Alistair. It was just absolutely shocking.
I don't want to be a wise guy, but I told Jody we're going to get 50 because I've seen this coming weeks and weeks before.
You saw this coming?
Yeah, I did. Our wings are too small. Listen, against New Zealand, there's only the first channel you defend is the outside channel. They beat us in the outside channel because our wings are too small. It's just, it is what it is. I love Raymond Rule, but he was like a turnstile on Saturday. Let's be honest. He was like a turnstile.
But Raymond Rule has been like a turnstile, playing for the Cheetahs, playing in Super Rugby. You know what? Maybe I thought maybe Alistair Coetzee is sacrificing solidity in defence with maybe attack. You know what? Maybe that's what he's doing.
He said it. He said I prefer my wings to chase the high ball. That's what he said.
Well, we didn't even get a high ball to chase. We were, in fact, we're chasing our tails, chasing the scoreboard. 31-0 at halftime against the All Blacks. You might as well go home.
No, the sad thing was we actually played okay the first 10 minutes or so. You know, we looked like we were up for this. We looked like we were up for and we were just overrun. But it's you know, the rugby teams are made out of combinations. They're built out of combinations, right? You need a back three, you need a centre pairing, you need a 9 and 10, you need a loose trio, locks, and then your front row. If you kind of build it around that, all of these, the combinations we have, they're all unbalanced. We're playing 3 number 7s in the loose trio. We're playing, at times, we play 3 wings at the back or 3 fullbacks. Our centres, the one's a fullback, and so forth.
Our scrum half is really meant to be a wing.
A wing. You know, it's specialists in specialist positions. It's not rocket science, this thing, Kendall.
Yeah.
You know, and we've learned how to play against New Zealand over the years.
Absolutely.
New Zealand are going to run you ragged on the outside channel. They take it up the middle, and then they hit you with the wings, the big wingers.
Absolutely.
And you have to defend those wingers.
And they will shift the ball from point of collision, point of action, to 3 or 4 passes down the line, different ways, and then they cut through you. We've got some comments.
Let's have a look at it.
Let's see what's being said.
Mondley says, forgive them as they were beaten by a team with quality players. Actually, this wasn't the greatest All Black side I've ever seen.
Absolutely. They were not tested in any way whatsoever. You know, that second try was like a touch rugby try. Michael Bigham's-Toller says, I personally think that the coach is not fit to be a Bok coach. We're going nowhere with him. And what happened over the weekend was an embarrassment. And
the one thing, Michael, that we have to say, when the coach wins, the smart guys on social media tell us, it's Brendan Fenter and Franco Smith that bring it.
And the captain.
Brendan Fenter and Franco Smith have to take as much responsibility for the defeat as Alistair Coetzee. I just think horses for courses, pick the best players and create combinations. Build combinations. That's the great box sides that won World Cup. They had combinations that played together for years and years and years. Matfield and Buckies. You can look at these kind of combination play. Fourie de Pre and the like. Combinations win you World Cups.
And manage it well. There's a coach, Peter de Villiers, who managed to do it right. He beat them in Hamilton. He beat them here in South Africa. The only coach to have done that 2 times in a row that Peter de Villiers did this. So maybe bring him in.
We don't rate P. de Villiers because he doesn't speak English too great, but that's South Africa for you. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with you at the top of the hour with another complete news update. A lot happening on this Monday morning.
We take an in-depth look of all your stories of the day across the world.
Last month, Mkhwebane said that the bank had failed in its duties to protect the public by not ensuring that ABSA repaid an apartheid-era bailout given to the failed bank, Bancorp. The rand fell nearly 2% on her remarks.
My effort, in my opinion, is going to be to build a Zimbabwe that I believe in, as opposed to remaking a Zimbabwe of the past that I cannot do anyway. So I'm absolutely clear on this.
We need to start showing more commitment by government that they are committed to working with business, and therefore that should start to stimulate confidence, and with confidence comes investment, and with investment hopefully comes growth.
Stay tuned to Primetime News every day from 18 hours.
The Law Society has slammed notices sent to 4 universities to jack up standards or risk losing their LLB courses. The Council on Higher Education issued a stern warning to the universities to conform within 6 months.
I think it will affect the university. I think outside the law faculty, there's a funding issue.
It's been 112 years since Enoch Sontonga died as a relatively unknown composer, choir master and teacher. But today his legacy lives on through his greatest composition, Nkosi Sikeleli Afrika.
For all your news updates, stay tuned to Your World from Monday to Sunday.
Welcome back. It's Monday morning, and yes, it's the day after the weekend that's gone before. We've had a lot happening. Sport first, but we've dealt with that.
Yeah.
The KPMG report, well, that's the big story of the weekend.
Absolutely, and actually drawn the focus to where it belongs, with the auditing firm that are meant to be the guardians of ethical practices in business.
Now, if you've missed it, KPMG, they withdrew this report linking former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and several other SARS employees to this alleged rogue unit. They also accused of facilitating tax evasion, Kendall, money laundering and corruption.
Absolutely, and we wanted to find out from you, what do you think about this matter? Should KPMG be prosecuted for unethical business practices?
We've got that poll that's been running since this morning. Let's just have a look at how you guys are voting on the poll.
First up, you'll have a look. You'll see that we've got 395 votes and getting a lot of traction, this poll is. Yep. And still an overwhelming, almost 100%, 96% of you are saying, yes, they should be prosecuted.
Yeah, no doubt. They should be prosecuted is what you are saying. Overwhelming majority as such. But what are you saying? What are you tweeting us?
Got one from the Ayatollah El Sultan says, yes, innocent breadwinners have lost their jobs because of their unethical behavior.
Yeah, that's true. We heard that from the horse's mouth, as it were, a little bit earlier. Francis Nicholson says, yes, but they are not the biggest fish to fry. You need evidence, Francis. Evidence, evidence, evidence. That's what they say. But interesting interview I had with a clinical psychologist a little bit earlier about Lizelle Way is the name, and she spoke about the bystander effect. Kendall, did you listen to that?
I did. I heard a bit of it, and it was very interesting. Yeah. I think I think we need to play that one again because a lot of people would have missed out. But just so to bring you in the conversation, we want to find out from you, what do you do when you see someone being attacked? Do you turn the other way? Do you mind your own business? Or do you save the day?
Others just film it and put it on social media. She says we're losing a little bit of our humanity, and there's disunity amongst our ranks as people. Every man for himself, every woman for herself, Kendall. That's what it is.
Some people say. Renault comes in with safety first. If I'm in a position to intervene, then I will, or else I'll assist by calling the authorities.
Ish, that's what we're talking about, the bystander effect right there. The Ayatollah tells us, yes, I did it once when two thieves tried to rob a young boy of his iPad. Yeah, I've seen a lot of those. People have tweeted me a lot of that kind of stuff. Is that there are many people out there that are trying to make a contribution, but all of us should be activists. That's what Lizelle told us a little bit earlier.
I tell you what, I've been on the receiving end of the bystander effect, and it's only when you fight back that people start intervening. Yeah. Because when you're not in a position to fight back, people are more likely to just stand by and watch.
She says we are like sheep, and we lack leadership. Only when there's a leader will we all follow. Sheeple, interesting one. Anyhow, the Boks were like sheep over the weekend. What's the way back for the Springboks? That's our question, isn't it?
It's not changing their name, I'll tell you that.
Oh, thanks.
Bambi. Oh, yeah.
Everyone's got a sense of humor today. There we go. That was it. They don't call the Springboks now. They're called the Bambis.
What's the way back for the Springboks?
Thanks, Johan. That's our director, Johan Verhoef, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, putting in his 2 cents worth there. 57-0 drubbing by the All Blacks in a stadium they're not used to playing in themselves in Auckland. Yeah. And we want to find out from you, what's the way back? I mean, Siafana comes and will say it's difficult for our Springboks team, but they must make sure that they win the upcoming game.
Yep, that's the way back. The next one have to be one. Rudy tells us, I don't see any way back. I know they'll defeat the Wallabies, but All Blacks, they must accept his back.
It's back.
Now, in Cape Town, of course, is where the next game will take place in the month of October. It's a sellout already at Newlands. They haven't played there in more than 10 years. It's going to be a great game. But let's not talk sport all morning, Kendall. It's time for us now to get to your top stories. More sporadic attacks on vehicles, including buses, continue in a number of areas in Cape Town as the taxi strike gains momentum. The South African Revenue Services will any moment from now brief the media on the withdrawal of the SARS report by KPMG. And the Gauteng government has admitted now that not enough action is being taken to end the ongoing turf war between Uber and metered taxi operators. Those are your top stories right now. Let's go to Kendall for sport.
Ewan, thank you very much. We've been speaking a lot about what the Springboks have been up to and what happens next. But you know what? Let's bring you back to what happened over the weekend. This is what we've got planned for you in today's Sports Bulletin. The Springboks come back from Auckland after sinking to a new all-time low as they failed to register even a single point in a humiliating 57-0 training session for the All Blacks.
No, it doesn't push us back at all. In my book, it's still a massive progression. If you look like this is the only test we've lost so far, you know.
And defending champions Mamelodi Sundowns grab all 3 points in the first leg CAF Champions League quarter-final as they beat Wydad Casablanca 1-0. And tennis in South Africa makes great strides as the Davis Cup team beats Denmark 3-1 to gain promotion to Euro Africa Group 1.
Brilliant for South Africa. Lloyd Harris comes up with the goods in the fourth set. Look.
And it's lights out, away we go. Verstappen gets an excellent start. Sebastian Vettel will need to cover him off. Kimi Raikkonen on the inside, and he's crashed with Verstappen. He's hit Vettel as well. Raikkonen is out.
Lewis Hamilton starting in 5th place comes out unscathed in the first lap carnage, which takes out Vettel, Verstappen and Raikkonen to win and extend his championship lead to 28 points.
Hamilton wins in Singapore and is 28 points clear at the top of the championship. Ferrari's pain, Hamilton's gain.
Yeah, no, very well said. Ferrari's pain, Hamilton's gain. All this and more a little later in the Sports Bulletin, right about 10:40. Do stay with Evan as he's got the news.
Thank you very much, Kendall. Very good morning to you. Our top story right now is that sporadic attacks on vehicles, including buses, are continuing in a number of areas in Cape Town. Several Golden Arrow buses were stoned in Site C in Khayelitsha and on the N2 incoming near Borchers Quarry Road this morning. A bus has been set alight in Delft and 2 private vehicles stoned in Govan Mbeki Drive in Philippi. The protest follows a similar one that last month and is expected to affect taxi operations in areas such as Attridgeville, Hammanskraal, Soshanguve and Mamelodi. However, some taxi associations, including Santaco and Mawikta, are not in support of the march and have promised that the taxis will operate today. Now, reporter Vanessa Puna has been following the developing story here this morning. Since very early, actually. And she joins us now from Borchers Quarry in Cape Town. A very good morning to you, Vanessa. Just tell us quickly, it seems as if matters are escalating. What is the latest?
Yeah, but yes, good morning to you. Matters indeed escalating with sporadic incidents of violence, stoning and also setting alight of vehicles. Right now you're at Borchers Quarry. Behind me you'll see that police and metro officials are keeping a very close eye. Buses have been turned around here going into Nyanga this morning, Eben, as buses have been attacked. We've seen a group behind us stoning vehicles coming through, so police are indeed keeping a very close watch. Also, information just coming through to us from the city's WhatsApp group saying that the N2 has been closed before the R300. Now, I'm not quite sure whether this is the N2 outbound or the N2 inbound, and apparently reports now that a My City bus has also been set alight. I've spoken to some Golden Arrow officials on the ground who won't speak on camera, but saying to us that there's been quite a number of their commuters that have been injured, showing me some pictures of commuters that had been injured as well when their buses were stoned across various areas in Cape Town. Also, we've heard that in Dunoon there's been a number of incidents as well. If you'll see behind me, vehicles coming through at their own peril, really, Eben, as they have been advised not to come through. The road also littered with pieces of rock, as the police and officials keep a close watch amid this ongoing illegal taxi strike. We haven't seen many taxis in this area this morning, Eben. Since early this morning, we had commuters really at a loss for what they were going to do. Of course, by now it's already gone 10 o'clock this morning. Some of them telling us that they would rather take the day off, go back home, because they had no idea whether they're going to get to work safely and if there would be transport for them to come back home again this afternoon.
Now, but Vanessa, of course, we know some of the other taxi associations, they come out and they say that they'll continue businesses as usual. Santaco said this, Mawikta said this. Are there routes that are running in the Cape right now, and are people getting to work with some ease, or is it very difficult?
It's difficult to say because we know that there's a meeting scheduled to have started at 9 o'clock this morning out in Wynberg, which is quite away from where we are at the moment. But the taxi drivers we were speaking to and the taxi owners in Khayelitsha telling us this morning that they will not be driving today. We also had pictures of the taxis stagnant at the taxi rank, usually bustling at that time of day. There wasn't a commuter in sight because there had been communication, people saying that they've seen pamphlets warning them that there wouldn't be any taxis. But what I can tell you, Eben, is that when we were in Khayelitsha this morning, people making a beeline for the trains, even people standing between train carriages, eager to get to work this morning, and then also quite a number of buses filled to capacity, Eben, as people try to make their way to work. So, of course, we're waiting for the outcome of that meeting to hear exactly what is being discussed. But at this point, the situation volatile in various pockets across Cape Town. I'm standing and staring at the N2 right now, very blocked from what I see. Also in the distance, if we can just pan our camera to show you, if you can see, there's quite a bit of smoke there, and that's of course where I suppose is where that My City bus has been set alight, causing havoc on the main artery coming into Cape Town. That's of course the N2 highway. So Eben, yes, all along the areas we've been, Yanga, Philippi, Khayelitsha this morning, people standing around, milling around, some of them not knowing what to do, others just participating or rather just bystanding and seeing what's been happening. Quite a few people telling us that they're very fearful. Some people also telling us, please don't go in there, you are not safe. So at the moment here at Borchards Quarry, it seems as though the situation has calmed down for now. But of course, police not taking any chances and law enforcement officials still keeping a close watch. A short while ago, another truck, even in the background, you can see this truck's windows has just been smashed. If we can show you that, that's the kind of thing we've been seeing all morning, Eben, as drivers of delivery vehicles, trucks, etc., had to endure possibly being stoned. And we've just shown you that visuals there of that one truck which has come under some attack by stoning.
Vanessa, incredible developing story there. Thanks for your work and stay safe there. It looks like it's very volatile there in Borchards Quarry Road. That's just close to the airport, actually, down in Cape Town for those of you living elsewhere. And it seems as if, well, attacks on other vehicles continue there. Yes, it's a crisis in the taxi industry. Vanessa Puna coming to us live there. While we're talking about crisis between, well, in the taxi industry, the Gauteng government has now acknowledged that the number of arrests made in another ongoing turf war, the one between Uber and metered taxi operators, well, it's worryingly low, they say. Over 160 cases have now been opened with police and only 28 suspects have been arrested. No one has been convicted thus far. Violence between the two transport service providers has increased in recent months, resulting in the death of an Uber driver in the capital. Meanwhile, a man accused of burning an Uber driver with acid is expected to appear in the Rudaport Magistrates Court. Khomot Sotiro allegedly had acid poured on him by a cash client who picked up in Northcliffe. The attack resulted in severe burns to his face, neck and hands. Gauteng Premier David Makura says national government has been roped in to assist in tackling the violence. The Gauteng Transport Department will soon launch a campaign to expedite the processing of applications for operating permits for Uber as well as metered taxi drivers. Now, metered taxi drivers had often complained that Uber operators were not licensed to operate, but the department says out of the 2,900 metered taxis operating in the province, only 500 of them have permits. It seems so far more than 600 new licenses have been operated to Uber operators.
If we don't clamp down on this, we will have another form of killings that are carried out by hired assassins. The history of taxi violence is that the corridor the taxi violence has always had was the Gauteng KwaZulu-Natal corridor. The same people hired by the taxi people to kill. It's the same people who are hired to carry out politically inspired murders in KwaZulu-Natal.
The South African Revenue Services is this morning expected to brief the media on the withdrawal of the SARS report by KPMG. The auditing firm has come under fire after it was accused of facilitating tax evasion, money laundering and corruption by giving Gupta-linked entities clean audits. The firm has since admitted shortcomings in reference to these audits. KPMG South Africa has since apologized for its role in the SARS rogue unit saga as well. The business announced drastic changes to its top structure as it battles to save itself from the consequences of doing business with the Gupta family. Among the changes include the resignation of the CEO and 8 other officials. KPMG said it would donate the 40 million rand it earned in fees from Gupta-controlled firms to charity and refund 23 million rand rather it earned compiling a controversial report for the South African Tax Service. The auditing firm has also withdrawn a report on the so-called rogue unit at SARS. The report raised questions about the leadership of Pravin Gordhan when he was the SARS commissioner, as well as other tax officials. Meanwhile, former SARS spokesperson Adrian Lackay has confirmed that the former finance minister Pravin Gordhan and other colleagues are seeking legal advice after KPMG withdrew its report linking them to this alleged rogue unit within SARS. Lackay said this during an earlier interview we had with him.
I agree with Mr. Gordhan, who since Friday argues that this was one of the attempts to take over the well-functioning state institution that did its work independently in fighting corruption, in making sure the levels of tax compliance in the country improve, and to ensure that adequate resources are provided for our fiscus through tax revenue and tax collection. And SARS was a model public institution. It played a significant role to combat corruption and to expose abuses in the public finance system. And I think if we reflect back on what happened throughout 2016, many people played politics. I think the ultimate target has always been Mr. Pravin Gordhan in his portfolio as Minister of Finance until March this year. And then we saw firstly a very public display by Mr. Shaun Abrams announcing he will issue summons against those 3 individuals I've mentioned, and then 2 weeks or so later withdrawing those charges. But even at his media briefing at the end of October 2016, when Mr. Abrams withdraws the summons and the charges, for the first part of his media briefing, he still hammers on the existence of this rogue unit and perpetuates all the allegations that, in fact, it actually existed. In fact, there may be cause for further investigation and so on. And in the same way, the Hawks conduct themselves to this day, indicating still to the public, but investigations continue. So no one has concretely put a stop to this, to say it was nonsense, to admit that investigative processes were manipulated, to admit that big corporates like KPMG, like other law enforcement agencies, were directed to act and to find in a certain way against certain individuals. And if we can get those admissions and the true facts, I think that is owed to the South African public and taxpayers.
The annual high-level debate of the UN General Assembly begins tomorrow, but heads of state and government, including President Jacob Zuma, are already on the ground. The World Cup of diplomacy gets underway. And while the South African delegation begins to lobby for its bid for a non-permanent seat on the Security Council, the United States will host a meeting on UN reform later today, while the President of the General Assembly has convened a high-level gathering to draw political attention to the devastation caused by Hurricane Irma in the Caribbean, as well in some parts of the US.
The buzz around the first visit to UN headquarters of United States President Donald Trump is a mix of anticipation and the complete unknown. The unpredictable nature of the US leader and his much vaunted America First policy could make his first foray into the largest multilateral setting in the world an absolute must-see. While he addresses the General Assembly on Tuesday, he'll host a high-level meeting on UN reform Monday, while tensions in the Korean Peninsula, the Iran nuclear deal and several bilaterals, including with the leaders of Israel and Palestine, will be closely watched.
To start off with the speech that the president gives, I think you can see it for yourself. I personally think he slaps the right people, he hugs the right people, and he comes out with U.S. being very strong in the end. And so I think the president has always believed there's great potential in the United Nations, but I think now the world is seeing it, that it is actually changing and it's actually becoming more effective.
Other newcomers to the UN will include French President Emmanuel Macron, Gambia's new President Adama Barrow, while appearances here by Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari will be closely watched due to continued questions about his health.
Yes, he's leading the delegation to this General Assembly, and he's in very good health. You know, he really is back to what he was before.
South Africa will also officially get its bid for its third non-permanent seat on the Security Council underway this week, despite a reluctance by the Minister of International Relations to talk about it.
Let's keep it that way until we get it. We are not necessarily not in a business of counting impalas that are still running in the field.
So not in the next 2 years?
Let's leave it that way.
Officials from her department and the South African mission to the UN have since confirmed that South Africa will bid for a 2-year seat on the Council starting in 2019. Most critical will be winning the support of fellow African countries who have in recent years decided on African representation in the Council by providing an unopposed slate for elections in the General Assembly. UN member states are then left merely to rubber stamp the regional decision or reject it, which seems unlikely. Sherman Bryceby's SABC News, New York.
Well, now let's get back to our theme for today. Fight or flight. Yeah, at some point in our lives we will discover what our response to danger is. But what happens when it's not ourselves that's in danger, but another person? Do you turn the other way, not wanting to get involved in other people's business, as we call it? Too afraid of losing your own life? Or does your adrenaline start pumping and that inner hero breaks out and saves the day? Or do you stand by watching on, maybe even capturing the incident on your cell phone, waiting for someone else, someone more experienced, bigger, braver, to intervene? It's called the bystander effect. And joining us in studio is the South African Police Services Brigadier Matapelo Peters. A very good morning to you, ma'am. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, Evan, and thanks for having me.
Daily, weekly, we see cell phone footage of crimes being filmed and people just standing by, not doing anything. What do you make of this kind of behavior as the police?
From the police's side, we've noticed that there is a trend in this type of behavior where people will opt to rather take photos and videos and post on social media instead of, for us, it's more about reporting it to the police, because in some cases, people have been injured or even killed when trying to assist, and you don't know what the circumstances are. So we've gone out on several times appealing to members of the public to come forward with information, whether they've witnessed an incident or so, and assist the police in apprehending the suspects.
So you say, don't intervene, phone the police?
I think at that point, it would be your discretion, but I think the first and foremost, we advocate for your personal safety first. So rather call the police, whether it's on 08600 10111, and moreover, the police also have a Facebook page and a Twitter page. So if you feel that you want to post on social media, maybe perhaps just tag the police so that we have immediate information. It's not left up to us to find out at a later stage, and you find that there's information that's been compromised when we could have apprehended the suspects in a short space of time.
Are you happy that the police, the response times to crimes being committed are short enough for people to have faith in that process?
If the cases get reported, we do react immediately, but it's in instances like this where we have to pick it up on social media, then the response time becomes a problem.
What about vigilantism? How do you view vigilantism and the rise of mob justice here in South Africa?
Well, we've realized that in some cases people become frustrated and they end up taking the law into their own hands. We've gone on record many a times asking people to refrain from that kind of behavior, because with all good intentions you might have of assisting the victim, you might end up becoming the criminal yourself, because you'll get arrested for either murder or whatever crime it is that you will have done against the suspect in that case.
We talk about the bystander effect, people standing by and filming the kind of acts that we see on screen happening now. I spoke to a clinical psychologist a little bit earlier, and she said that there's a lack of leadership, and people are behaving more and more like sheep with regards to the kind of thing, and calls for more activism. Would you make that same call, that people should become more active, not just in incidents, but also more active in their communities?
I think that activism, if it's there, should be practiced with restraint. Like I said, people have ended up becoming injured or even killed. So if they are to become active, instead of posting on social media, let them rather collaborate with the police, because we've been going out asking for cooperation from the community.
Brigadier, thank you very much for coming in today. South African Police Service Brigadier Matapelo Peter says, yes, activism, but you need to have restraint, and we should not be vigilantes in South Africa. That's the role of the South African police, is to, well, to deal with criminal elements in our society. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
That was Brigadier Matapelo Peters talking to us about, well, a whole range of issues. Of course, we're asking you the question, would you intervene? What would you do if this kind of thing happens to you? That's our question of the day, of course. And you guys have been tweeting us on this question. Will you intervene when you see someone being attacked on the street? What are the tweets? Mystic Man tells us, yes, but safety first. I'll get a nice corner with my cell phone camera, record the action, and I send it to the Minister of Police for further intervention. Mhlanganisi says to us, yes, but depending on the nature of the attack, because if it involves weapons, then it's another story. Yeah, that's a common one. People saying weapons is the one thing. Now, we've seen this tweet already. This one from Shonisani Hassan, who says to us, Newsroom, no. Criminals, they have a lot of rights in our country. I think it's better to call the police. Well, you just see one of our guests sitting down here as we speak. Well, anyhow, it's a live show. This is what we do. We get on with it. Now, for years, South Africa has pointed out similarities between this country's apartheid regime and then Israeli-Palestinian relations. Now, this has claims that a system of control is still occupying the West Bank. However, Israel is attempting to continue trade relations with Africa, well, by arranging an Africa-Israel summit, which has since now been cancelled. Earlier this year, the leader of the Democratic Alliance, Mmusi Maimane, embarked on a trip to Israel and Palestine in order to foster peace, he says. This despite President Jacob Zuma's call for South Africans to refrain from traveling to Israel. Now, joining us in studio is the Jewish Board of Deputies political commentator, Jamie Meekty. Is that right?
Well, I'm not the Jewish Board of Deputies political commentator. My apologies. I'm a member of civil society, African debating champion. I was brought to the attention that this conversation would be had, and I thought my input would be an interesting input, considering that normally the sides that I heard are vested interests.
Who do you represent?
So I have a blog site called The Bottom Line on Facebook with over 20,000 followers. I'm an African debating champion, and I'm part of an organization called Africans for Peace, which is a think tank that discusses global conflict within Johannesburg.
How do you view the cancellation of the Afro-Israel summit, call it that?
Okay, so my thinking is, in the first instance, there's a lot of attraction that Africa has for everybody. You've got 2.4 billion people projected to be in Africa in 2050. You've got 7% growth in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of excluding South Africa, which is growing at 2%. And any state would be attracted to Africa. In fact, they say there's a new scramble for Africa by most of the world. And I think Israel is wanting to be part of that entrepreneurial and diplomatic move into Africa, so to speak. So I think that's the thrust of why they are pushing for this particular move by hosting a summit, obviously to create a nexus of relationships within sub-Saharan Africa most dominantly.
The cancellation of the summit, though, how do you view this? Is this a positive or negative? How should it be viewed by either side?
Well, I think the choice of Togo as a host was unfortunate. just because there's been a lot of conflict in Togo. I'm sure you guys have been covering it. I've heard some interviews where SABC has been talking about it. Basically, the president of Togo has been in power with his family for the last 50 years. And as a result of that, what has happened is that there have been massive protests. And I don't think that those environmental conditions were conducive for the continuation of the proposed summit, which was to be held in October, I believe.
When we talk about business, of course, Africa positions itself as open for business, and this will be the African century for business. This kind of development, is it a scenario of putting politics before business, and how should we view that as Africans?
Look, I think Africa faces three big problems. I think most people will agree: poverty, unemployment, lack of jobs. Those are the big problems, as well as inequality, which would be the third one. In terms of dealing with those, as well as security, Israel offers a unique input into all of those, because if you consider from a position of entrepreneurship, right now, a lot of entrepreneurial work has been happening in Israel. I mean, Apple recently acquired an Israeli company earlier in the year and used the technology to put it on the iPhone 8, which is coming out, I think, on Friday, and also in the iPhone 10, which is coming out on the 3rd of November. So it shows you that Israeli technology is world-class and preeminent. And I think Africa, because we continue to talk about we want to make our own cars, want to make our own candles, I think Julius Malema and the economic freedom fighters based their whole manifesto on the fact that they want to see African production within Africa. So I think if you want that, if you want to be able to produce your own goods, a country that is 70 years old and can do that whilst helping you with water challenges as well as security. It's no secret that Boko Haram is a problem in Africa. There's a lot of terrorism coming out in Somalia, and Kenya has had problems with it before. So African states have a serious problem with securing their own states. We have bad intelligence and we have bad handling of internal security issues. I think all three of those things are things that Israel can make a positive contribution to. So I don't think it's necessarily just entrepreneurial expedience, but like they do have a package to contribute.
How do you view the concept Israeli apartheid?
How do I view the concept of it? Do you mean whether I agree with it or I don't agree with it? Well, I don't think that Israel is an apartheid state as is commonly bandied around in South Africa. I'm an African citizen. I'm from Zimbabwe. My mother's South African. My dad is Zambian. So my approach to this is not as emotional as it sometimes is in South Africa. When you look at the infrastructure of apartheid, apartheid was a system of laws designed to oppress. So you look at the Mixed Marriage Act, you look at the Bantu Education Act, you look at the Land Acts, the various Land Acts, which were orchestrated to deprive black people of a share of the land within the state. Now, if you look at Israel, there is freedom to vote for the 2 million Arab citizens who live there. They can form political parties. These are the things that Nelson Mandela wanted for South Africans. He went into jail to make sure that South Africans could have the right to vote. That was part of the fight, could have the same education as everybody else. Now, when I've studied the legislative systems of Israel, I've not seen any evidence proving that there is a system of laws designed to create a 2-tier or 3-tier citizenship as existed under apartheid.
What about discrimination in access to education, healthcare, employment, residency, building rights? How do you view those?
Look, discrimination occurs across the world. In South Africa, maybe you have better access than I would have as a black man to certain resources, just based on the history of the country.
That's an assumption.
Yeah,
that's an assumption. That
it is an assumption, but if you look at the poverty data that came out of Stats SA,
just answer the question.
So the answer to your question is simply this: there is no legislative discrimination in Israel. There was legislative discrimination in South Africa. There were several laws that the Nationalist Party put in place to make it illegal for black people to become doctors, to become lawyers, to become engineers. Currently at the University of Tel Aviv, Arab students and Jewish students can all study to pursue an education as they see fit.
In conclusion, with all of what you've just said, the UN has called on countries to boycott relations with Israel until atrocities stop. Do you disagree with the United Nations?
I don't think the UN has called for that. I think what the UN made a pronouncement on was the issue of settlement, which is a different issue
no, it was a
to what we have been.
That's what my research says.
Your research says the United Nations called, no, your research would be incorrect, because the United Nations made a condemnation on the issue of settlements, which is a distinct issue to diplomatic ties to Israel. I don't think that diplomatic ties to Israel should be cut, because I don't think that cutting diplomatic ties, moving away from dialogue and engagement, is the best way to be involved in a peace-finding manner in a conflict that is very complex and has been long-lasting.
I thank you very much for joining us today. Unfortunately, we got your name wrong, and I apologize for that.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for coming in. We're going to take a short little break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
The Pan-African Parliament, as a legislative body, could go a long way in continuing to promote women's rights in all African member states.
Moon will be elected president. A decisive win by him will provide much-needed stability in South Korea.
The Deputy President and the SADC Oversight Committee have been mandated to convene a multi-stakeholder national dialogue before elections.
5 teams are trapped in the relegation mud. These include Bloemfontein Celtic, 12 on the log, followed by Chipa United, Free State Stars and Baroka, who are second from the bottom, as well as Highlands Park, who have won only 4 matches.
We're on point with breaking stories, detailed economy and sport. Tune in to Midday Report every Monday to Friday from 12 p.m.
I think winter is definitely one of those seasons where you can really show off your sartorial choices. You can start from a single layer of a shirt, actually starting with thermals, build it up with the shirts. You can have beautiful knits over the shirts, like we've done with Jay.
This film tells the story of a very, very significant political figure in the struggle for freedom in South Africa, who happened to be a woman. She was Nelson Mandela's wife.
The exhibition is an exploration into black femininity. Tabitha is a woman of colour, and she is exploring the historical exploitation of the black female body.
Newtown Junction Mall hosted an epic contest in the cold where 3 top South African graffiti artists battled it out for the opportunity to become the Newtown Graffiti Face-Off Master.
For your weekly dose of entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
Welcome back. Now, the Human Rights and Palestine Solidarity Organization, BDS South Africa, has welcomed the calling off of the Africa-Israel Summit, which was meant to take place in Togo next month. The event was themed Building Bridges Towards Greater Shared Prosperity and was set to build Israel's diplomatic, trade and security relations with Africa. However, several countries, including South Africa, were planning to boycott the summit. Now, I'm joined in studio now by the National Coordinator of Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions Movement, Mohammed Desai. Very good morning to you, Mohammed. Thanks for being with us.
Morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Before I ask you to respond to the interview that you saw a little bit earlier, just give me a quick overview of why do you, as BDS, support the calling off of the Africa-Israel Summit?
Well, unlike the Jewish Board of Deputies, the Zionist Federation, or its lackeys, the BDS movement, both locally in South Africa as well as internationally, together with progressive organizations and movements on this continent, celebrate the calling off of the summit, because in many ways, our continent is not a continent of victims. Our continent is not a continent of charity. Our continent is a proud continent that has unshackled itself from the yoke of colonialism and is proudly charting a a new way forward. And we don't need to be colonized by yet another occupying and repressive state such as Israel or any other oppressive regime. And so Israel really, its agenda within the African continent and with this Africa-Israel summit was really about its exporting of arms and military to our countries and to our people to cause further strife on the one hand, and on the other hand was literally even to bribe and to try to win votes within the United Nations by buying off African states. And so really this Africa-Israel summit was bad news for our continent, and we join progressive organizations across the continent in welcoming the cancellation of the summit.
I asked our previous guest for a view on the concept of Israeli apartheid, and he went at length to say that there's no legislative framework that exists within Israel to deal with or that shows that there is any form of apartheid in Israel. You at BDS have been very passionate about this. How do you view that?
Well, we can't participate in Mickey Mouse research. I think that we have to take our guidance from organizations such as Human Rights Watch, such as Amnesty International, and such as the United Nations that produced a report earlier this year in very clear language calling Israel's practices against the Palestinian people a form of apartheid under international law. But more significantly, perhaps for us as South Africans, is our stalwarts, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Professor John Dugard, and various others that have visited Palestine and Israel and have come back saying that the situation that us black South Africans experienced during the 70s, during the 80s, is a mirror image of what the Palestinians today are facing.
You then see the cancelling of the event in Togo. My previous guest also said Togo was the wrong venue for this for the summit. You see this as a win?
Well, it's an interesting one. It's interesting in that Israel chose Togo, this dictatorship in many ways, as the host for this Africa-Israel summit. Togo, after all, had the longest serving African dictator on this continent, and thereafter, after he stepped down or after he passed away, his son took over for another 3 terms. This is a kind of partners that Israel looks in the world today. Doesn't look for democratic, peace and justice-loving people to forge relations, but instead looks for such authoritarian regimes. And so it's interesting that Israel would look at Togo to find such a partnership to further its interests on the continent.
A lot happened in the build-up to the summit. There were several threats in the lead-up to it. Just tell us about the decisions and the threats that led to the cancellation of the summit.
Well, we must put this whole thing in perspective firstly. Israel is increasingly under an immense isolation campaign. The United Nations produced a report just 2 years ago documenting how Israel has lost over 46% in foreign direct investment as a direct result of the international boycotts that the regime is facing. Israel is now looking into creating new partners and new partnerships, and is looking specifically at the African continent. The BDS movement, together with the Palestinian Authority, with Fatah, with Hamas, and the various other political organizations, together with Palestinian civil society and progressive Jewish comrades, both on the African continent, but in other countries as well, mobilized in terms of calling for a boycott, and various African countries began to say publicly that they will boycott, and some silently indicated that they won't be attending this Africa-Israel summit. But of course, there were a combination of reasons. There was, of course, the unrest in Togo, and Benjamin Netanyahu's own corruption scandals currently in Israel that are taking the center stage.
Let's personalize quickly what's coming out of the West Bank and Gaza right now. What is the picture like? What does the picture look like for mothers and children and fathers every day?
Well, I think that the situation is probably the bleakest that we've ever seen it, both within the West Bank but also within the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip, for example, the largest open-air prison in the world, as said by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, completely sealed off. The air borders, the land borders, the sea borders, completely sealed off from the international community. You have 1.7 million people living in the most densely populated piece of land on the earth. This is a piece of land of earth where Israel doesn't even allow things like chocolate or pasta to enter because of the embargo that it has in place on the people of Gaza for the last 10 years. So these are the kind of people that we are giving our solidarity to. These are the people that we are reaching out to, because these are also the people that during the darkest days of our own apartheid gave us the kind of solidarity and the kind of support that they are now asking for.
To wrap it up with the Africa-Israel summit, what's next within this space? Will you work towards making sure this never happens?
Well, I think that Israel is going to be trying really hard in the next few months to try to ensure that another similar summit takes place. But we've managed to create a good network on the African continent to now counter any Israeli influence in the continent. And also an interesting new ground that has been broken is the support and the constituency that has now been developed within churches on the African continent. Churches that are beginning to identify with the indigenous Palestinian Christians, for example, in Bethlehem and Jerusalem, and these churches that are now beginning to endorse the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign. So at the African level, that is what we'll be working on, increasing our partnership with the churches on this continent. But locally in South Africa, as we go towards the ANC's elective conference, we're looking forward to the ruling party of this country adopting that resolution which calls for the downgrading of the South African embassy in Tel Aviv.
Mohammed, I thank you for joining us today. The National Coordinator of Boycott, Divestment and the Sanctions Movement here in South Africa and globally, Mohammed Desai. Well, that's where we leave that discussion. I'm sure more will follow, but let's go over to Kendall now for our sports update.
Thank you very much, Evan. What a morning we've had here on Newsroom in terms of sport. A cracker over weekend. Some results we loved and some we absolutely hated. If you've been following the show, you'll know what I'm talking about. Let's talk about a result a lot of people have been celebrating. When Mamelodi Sundowns beat Wydad Casablanca 1-0 in their first leg of the 2017 CAF Champions League quarterfinals in Atteridgeville, Pretoria. The defending champions will take the Slim lead into their second leg in Morocco in a week's time. Meanwhile, Golden Arrows beat fellow KwaZulu-Natal outfit Amazulu 4-1 in their absolute premiership match in KwaMachu yesterday.
Not to concede, Ellie.
Mamelodi Sundowns took the match to Casablanca from the word go, with their captain Hlompo Kekana asking questions. With their faithful singing in the stands, Sundowns kept on probing, looking for an opening goal, but in vain. At half-time, it was still goalless. Sundowns were camping in Casablanca's half early in the second stanza, but without the end result they so desired. The Brazilians kept on applying pressure, and it came as no surprise to see Yannick Zakri finding the back of the net. Golden Arrows and Amazulu were each looking for a second win in the current campaign of the ABSA Premiership. A mix-up and poor communication in Usutu's defense led to Abafana Bestende's opening goal of the match. The goal, however, did not deter Amazulu's spirit as they pushed forward in search of an equalizer. Sedat Oro Akoriko restored parity as he connected with a well-weighted set piece. Early in the second half, Siphelele Makubane's run from the left flank led to Arrow's second goal. And at the death, Utakwashe Mahachi beat an offside trap and rounded the keeper before rolling the ball into an empty net. But Arrows were not done. The final score, Golden Arrows 4, Amazulu 1. Mtutuzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
All right, now this brings us to the important part, what the logs are looking like. I mean, those scores from the weekend was a 1-0 for Baroque over Free State, Kaizer Chiefs a 1-1 draw, and Platinum Stars a 0-0 against Chipa. Yesterday, of course, 4-1 to Golden Arrows. Now, looking at the log itself, you can see goal difference, really the big difference between Golden Arrows and Maritzburg United. The first time in living memory, for me at least, that the top of the log after the fourth round is headed up by two teams from KwaZulu-Natal. There's Arrows and Maritzburg right at the top there. Then Baroque FC in third position, Orlando Pirates in fourth, Sundowns having played 3 matches, they're sitting in fifth, Cape Town City sitting in sixth, and SuperSport United and Kaizer Chiefs bringing up the rest of the top 8. I'll bring you the rest of what the logs are looking like in the next hour. We'll now talk a little bit about the sadness of the weekend, where the South African national rugby team hightailed it out of New Zealand after that 57-0 record thrashing at the hands of the All Blacks in Albany. Now, the Springboks landed at OR Tambo International Airport last night, and my colleague Lizo Zanko was there to hear from the coach and the captain.
Yes, thank you very much. As you can see, the Springboks have arrived back in South Africa a short while ago from their Australasian trip. They played to a 23-all draw against the Wallabies in Perth last weekend, and then, of course, yesterday's 57-0 record loss to the All Blacks. The team is very disappointed, but they're not down and out. I spoke to coach Alistair Kitsia and captain Eben Etzebeth a few minutes ago.
Well, look, obviously we prepared well for the New Zealand week. But no excuses. We walked into a perfect storm. Obviously, we hit the All Blacks when they were really at their best. And, you know, everything they did really turned into points. I haven't seen a first 25 to 27 minutes where we actually looked like we've been playing well, but the scoreboard didn't reflect that. And, you know, they scored tries. Our execution was poor on the day, starting with a set piece, and also making lots of mistakes. And that is something that we did speak about, not making mistakes against the All Blacks, because they will punish you. But at the end of the day, they were just too classy. And, you know, they executed better on the day, and they took the opportunities. It doesn't push us back at all. In my book, it's still a massive progression. If you look like this is the only test we've lost so far, you know. We won 5 from 7. We drew against Australia. Last year, we lost both tests against Australia and New Zealand. And this year, we were very unlucky not to have come away with the spoils against Australia. But definitely New Zealand rested 8 players. 8 players came back. They really had a lot to play for. They've been criticised a lot, you know, and everything just, the bounce of the ball, just everything favoured them on Saturday. One loss doesn't define this team. There's still a lot of belief in this team. And there's still a lot of belief in myself and the plan that we're going to go forward with. There's a process that we're following. And, you know, I couldn't care what Twitter's saying, you know. I'm working for SA Rugby, not for Twitter. And we really are moving in the right direction. It was tough for us and a bit disruptive for us when we've lost Kuni after the Australian game, when we lost Jaco Kriel in the week of the All Blacks, and Ross Grenier, you know, 2 days before the test match, you know. So therefore we couldn't really keep that continuity, and the guys, obviously it's a test of our depth, and I'm pleased to say that those players tried their best, and you know, it just shows that we're not there yet, but we will take that, and hopefully we can take it into the next game, all those learning experiences.
I think we can beat them next game, or should we wait till next year?
We are 57 points behind them, and in 2 weeks time to turn that around is going to be a big ask. But we will work hard and we will do well. And obviously Australia first in Bloemfontein, and then New Zealand again in Cape Town. So to turn down 57 points in 2 weeks is going to be tough. But yeah, if the preparation is well, we maybe can do it.
So the All Blacks top the log. They've got 19 points, followed by the Springboks with 11. The Wallabies have 8, and Argentina have yet to open their account on the points log. New Zealand will now travel to Argentina, where they will face the Pumas in Buenos Aires. And then the Springboks have to regroup before they take on the Wallabies in Bloemfontein on the 30th of September. Back to you in studio.
Well, I'll tell you what, we come straight back to studio and we're now talking about Lewis Hamilton. So a little bit of sadness from having the Boks having lost to the All Blacks, and a little bit of happiness for Lewis Hamilton fans. Because you know what he did? This Mercedes driver, Lewis Hamilton, won an eventful Singapore Grand Prix. His main rival for the Drivers' Championship, Sebastian Vettel, walked away with 0 points from the track at a track which was suited to the Ferraris to the T. Ferrari's pain was indeed Hamilton's gain.
When the lights went out at the Marina Bay Street Circuit, the Ferraris had an opportunity to make up some lost ground against their rivals, Mercedes-Benz, who were starting on the third row of the grid, but it wasn't to be.
And he's crashed with Verstappen, he's hit Vettel as well. Raikkonen is out before the first corner, and he's gone into the Red Bull there as well. Carnage.
With the pack completely reshuffled after the accident, it was championship leader Lewis Hamilton who found himself leading the Singapore Grand Prix. After the restart, Hamilton bolted away at the front, pulling out a healthy lead over Red Bull's Daniel Ricciardo after just one lap, with Nico Hülkenberg running in third. The rain stopped on lap 6, with conditions rapidly favouring those running on intermediaries. The safety car was again called out when Daniel Kvyat crashed after locking up at the end of the back straight and understeering into the wall. Hamilton's Merc was unstoppable as he set about pulling away from the Red Bull, building up a nice lead over Ricciardo before the safety car came out a third time when Marcus Ericsson crashed on the Anderson Bridge. Again, Hamilton pulled clear at the restart, with the Mercedes driver quickly building up a lead of 4 seconds. Carlos Sainz was driving very well and finished a career best of 4th for Toro Rosso, ahead of Force India's Sergio Perez, while the struggling Jolyon Palmer had plenty of reason to smile after scoring his first points when he's finished 6th. Lewis Hamilton won the race ahead of Red Bull's Daniel Ricciardo, with his teammate Valtteri Bottas completing the podium. Lewis now has extended his championship lead to 28 points over Sebastian Vettel, with his Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas a further 23 points away from Vettel in third.
Wow, that's it. We'll be back top of the hour, but before that, Sihle is standing by with the weather.
Yes, that is true. Let's take a look at what's happening for today and tomorrow. Clear skies over most of Northern Cape, Western Cape, Free State and Northwest Province, while we are seeing some partly cloudy weather over the eastern parts of the country. And you look at KwaZulu-Natal, we're expecting isolated to scattered showers, but isolated more in the central parts going towards the coastal areas, but scattered in the northern parts from Richards Bay going towards Swaziland and the extreme northern parts. Touching a bit of Mozambique, only in the southern parts of Maputo may see some partly cloudy weather with some isolated showers possible. Otherwise, partly cloudy weather is persisting, especially in Zimbabwe and parts of Botswana. Clear skies in Zambia, Angola and the DRC for today. Tomorrow is still expecting clear skies over the central parts of the country. Partly cloudy weather is coming back to the Western Cape for tomorrow, and it's continuing in places like the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal province, and of course Mpumalanga for tomorrow. Otherwise, clear skies for Gauteng, Northwest Province, Free State, and mostly the western parts of Limpopo province for tomorrow. Looking at your warnings, we do have high FDI conditions for this northern northwest province, mainly the western parts, so do be careful there. But your temperatures for this afternoon looking like this: Dar at 25, Sutherland at 23 degrees. We're expecting cooler weather in Port Elizabeth at 23, even Durban as well, cool weather, a cloudy day for the rest of the day today, expecting a high of 21, with Mbombela there at 21, Pretoria at 27, while Polokwane is only peaking at 22. Today it's going to be quite a cool day. Moving further north, we're expecting clear skies here in places like the Botswana province and mainly the Zimbabwe. We're expecting a high of 33, while along the coastal areas, Maputo is peaking at 25 degrees Celsius, with Victoria Falls peaking at 29. Walvis Bay stays cool at 19 degrees, even though it is clear skies for tomorrow. Looking at the islands, we're expecting clear skies in Moroni at 30 degrees and Tananarive warming up to a lovely 28 for tomorrow. Over the DRC, we are expecting in the north isolated showers, but Kinshasa, not seeing anything there. We are seeing some partly cloudy weather for Luanda, while we are seeing the rest of Angola clear skies in the southern parts, including places like Lusaka for tomorrow, clear skies in those areas. While in the north, Juba peaking at 23, we are expecting cooler weather in that area. Into the extreme northern parts, we're expecting clear skies for most of Niger, but now they're coming towards Nigeria, which we haven't seen in a long time. Clear skies for Nigeria, but West Africa still sees all of those scattered showers, especially southern parts of Mali, Bamako for today and tomorrow. For tomorrow, it's only isolated showers. Most of the rainfall tomorrow moving towards the extreme western coastal areas, while places like Ghana starting to see clear skies once again after a longer period of partly cloudy weather. Otherwise, clear skies into Niger, Sudan, which is what we normally used to, including Egypt with highs of 34 if you're in Cairo, Khartoum at 43, and Agadez peaking at 42 degrees Celsius. Well, that is it from myself. Have yourself a lovely day.
Do you have a funeral policy?
No matter the sacrifices you've made or the hours you've worked, you can't always say yes. AVBOB's Cashback Funeral Plan not only provides funeral insurance for your family, but also helps you to say yes to life's little extras more often. Because for every 5 claim-free years, you'll get your 5th year's premiums based on your monthly premium value paid back in cash. SMS cash to 41790 and we'll call you. AVBOB, we're here for you.
SMS cash to 41790 and AVBOB will contact you.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time on this Monday, the 18th of September 2017. Jumbo Africa, and a warm welcome to the final hour. I'm Elvis Preston. We'll be with you until 12 o'clock. And today, of course, the focus is on, as we roll up, auditing firm KPMG withdrew its report linking the former Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, to the rogue unit. You remember the spy, the rogue unit within SARS? Well, they linked him to that, and that's why we're conducting this poll today. We want to find out from you. Let's put up the poll there and find out what's going on there. In fact, no, we're not going to go to the poll. We need to go live to the South African Revenue Service media briefing on the withdrawal of the SARS report by KPMG. Let's go there live.
The South African Revenue Service, Commissioner Tom Moyane. Next to him is the acting Chief Officer of BAIT, Mr. Dan Zulu. And next to Mr. Zulu on the far left is the Chief Officer Legal, Ms. Refilwe Mukwena. There are obviously other Chief Officers in attendance here. Being Chief Officer of Human Capital and Development, Mr. Debuko Mukwena, Mr. Jet Mikaletos, Chief Officer of Customs and Excise, Chief Officer of Enforcement, a welcome addition to the team, and a relief that somebody had to take over my dual role that I had. Now I can focus on what I'm supposed to do. So Chief Officer for Enforcement, Ms. Muhola Mukola. I think I'm going to insist that she stands up because I don't think that any of you has met her, and you may have to deal with her several times. Mukola, do you want to stand up so that they see you? No, I'm not asking you, I'm not requesting you, I'm instructing you to stand. Okay, so, and the Chief Officer for Additional Information Sciences, DIST, and Technology, Mr. Mamati Mukwani. What's the last part? Makeke. All right. There she is there. Can you stand up as well so they can see you? Yeah. And the Acting Chief Officer Finance, Mr. Johnstone Makubu. Sir, can you stand up if they don't know? So, my name is Klengan Matebula, and I will try and facilitate this press conference. Can I immediately then ask the Commissioner for SARS, Mr. Tom Moyane, to deliver his statement to you? Commissioner, I'm sure you can do this from where you are sitting. Just utilize the mic next to you.
Good morning, dear colleagues and members of the media. Our sincerest apologies for the delay, as Mr. Hlengani Matebula has alluded to yourselves. It is unprecedented that we delay our press conference with yourselves, and certainly would like to request your indulgence and accept our apology because we work on strict timelines. And certainly it is not our intention to have started as late as we have done. Indeed, as we have indicated in the request and the invite that we have made to yourselves, the issue that is on the table is the statement and the report that was made and issued on Friday, the 15th of September by KPMG. I want to indicate from the beginning that on the 15th of September at 09:24, an email was sent to the Office of the Commissioner, sent to my office by Norton Rose Fulbright, advising me the following. Dear Commissioner, SARS report stroke KPMG South Africa. We act for KPMG South Africa and KPMG International. We refer to the extensive document investigative review and collation of documents that KPMG South Africa conducted for SARS in 2014, 2015 in bracket in bold, investigative review close bracket, and to the report on allegations of irregularities and misconduct that KPMG South Africa produced as part of that engagement in brackets bold report. As you know, a version of the report dated the 3rd of September 2015 was leaked and made public on the 4th of October 2015. I need to emphasize, as you would know, a version of the report dated the 3rd of September was leaked and made public on the 4th of October 2015. KPMG International has conducted an investigation to certain matters involving KPMG South Africa, including the preparation of the report. The investigation was established, amongst others, that KPMG South Africa failed to appropriately apply quality controls in preparing the report and the letters provided to you on the 4th of December 2015. Both headed, I quote, Executive Report on Allegations of Misconduct and Irregularities, close quote. Accordingly, that part of the report which refers to the conclusions, recommendations, and legal opinions should no longer be relied upon. KPMG International will be issuing a public statement to this effect today. In the circumstances, and notwithstanding the firm's extensive work on this engagement, KPMG South Africa offers to repay the engagement fee of 23 million to SARS. Alternatively, at the election of the South African Revenue Service, KPMG South Africa will donate this sum to a charity of KPMG South Africa's choice. This offer is made on a without prejudice basis. Nothing in this letter should be construed as suggesting that the investigative review was of no value to the Southern Revenue Services. 15 September 2017. I'm quoting this letter precisely to indicate that hardly had the ink or the paper from the printer had become cold, KPMG had already issued a statement without due regard of giving the client the opportunity and the time to respond and to look into these matters. I would like, therefore, for the purpose of this press conference, refer to the following issues. KPMG's conduct. SARS notes the media statement was issued by KPMG International on the 15th of September. The statement includes KPMG's international actions pertaining, amongst others, the setting aside of conclusions and recommendations of, I quote, allegations of irregular and misconduct, close quote, report. 2, SARS received an email from Norton Rose Fulbright acting on behalf of KPMG International on that morning, the contents of which I've read to yourselves. SARS has been taken completely aback by KPMG's aberrant and ethical conduct. KPMG unilaterally announced the purported withdrawal of its report, despite the existence of a service-level agreement governing the relationship between the two parties. It is important to note the material terms of the service-level agreement, which provides that 1. All rights, title, and interest, including intellectual property rights, literary works created, written, and or presented by KPMG and or its agents and employees, which relate to the service performed by KPMG, vest exclusively in SARS. 2. KPMG has irrevocably and in perpetuity transferred, made over, and assigned to SARS all intellectual property rights and which SARS has accepted. And finally, KPMG has waived all its moral rights conferred upon it as an author by the provision of Section 20 of the Copyright Act of 1978. Accordingly, the above contractual obligation confirms that the report belongs to SARS, as KPMG has surrendered all rights to SARS. It follows that the report is an exclusive property of the South African Revenue Service, and it constitutes South African Revenue Service intellectual property. The South African Revenue Service sees KPMG's conduct as nothing else but a dismal attempt to portray SARS and its leadership in particular as incompetent, inefficient, and involved in a witch hunt activity. It is the same narrative that has been perpetuated for years by some elements within the society and in the media. This abhorrent, unethical, and unprofessional conduct by KPMG has left SARS with no option but to consider the following legal route. 1. Instituting legal proceeding against KPMG for reputational damage to SARS, including but not limited to a civil claim. 2. Report KPMG to the relevant statutory audit bodies, both locally and internationally. 3. Report KPMG to the Minister of Finance with the aim of blacklisting KPMG for its unethical, immoral, and unlawful behavior. 4. Report to KPMG to the Minister of Finance to consider stopping all work currently performed by KPMG in all other departments, as well as any other work in the pipeline, until all the work KPMG conducted for the state have been investigated and reviewed for quality and proper auditing quality and expected standards. 5. Immediately cease any work which KPMG is currently performing for SARS and assess the work KPMG has performed in the last 10 years with the aim to determine whether there was any value for money and whether SARS should demand its money back. And finally, report KPMG to Parliament through SCOPA and SCOF with the aim to investigate the immoral conduct of KPMG and determine the appropriate action. We'd like to indicate the following, that there's been a number of issues that are in the public space which have been ventilated through the media over the weekend, people calling for investigations of conduct that SARS has been involved in. All those disciplinary activities that were conducted in the past had no bearing whatsoever with respect to the report that was presented by KPMG. SARS has observed, of course, observed with astonishment that some employees and others have been crisscrossing different media platforms with making unfounded and baseless conclusions as a result of KPMG media statement. We want to categorically state here that the allegation that KPMG report was used as a basis for disciplinary action as well as to institute criminal offenses are at the best falsity and at worst deceitful and aimed at misleading South Africans in particular. We do have facts and sequence of events that attest to the above statement, that during the period 2014, August, there was an investigation that was conducted, and it was an outcome of Advocate Sikhakhane with a mandate to investigate allegations that SARS ran a rogue unit. The information was reported by the media then, in particular the Sunday Times and City Press newspapers. The claims were, amongst others, that SARS had a unit which was not only established legally, but was illegally intercepting taxpayer information. We then want to confirm that upon the appointment of the new commissioner into SARS in 2014, the Sikhakhane Commission delivered the report on the 5th of November 2014, with serious conclusions and recommendations. Chief amongst others, the recommendation was that indeed SARS ran an unlawful rogue unit led by and reporting to individuals in the organization, some with insidious gross misconduct committed by both those who were in the leadership position at the time. On the 28th of February 2015, the Minister of Finance, the then Minister of Finance, Mr. Nene, established a SARS advisory board, which was chaired by the retired Judge Kroon, with a mandate to look into SARS processes with priority, bearing into the investigation and guidance on the Sikhakhane report. It is common cause that the Kroon Advisory Board found that the establishment of the secret unit within SARS in 2007, which covertly gathered intelligence, was unlawful. The board went further, to instruct SARS to charge employees involved and open criminal charges against those implicated in these crimes. The 3 employees, amongst them Van Lochtenberg, Pillay, and Peter Richer, were charged as a result of the Sikhakhane report, respectfully, and the following dates, 14th, 5th of February, and lastly on the 2nd of April 2015. The 3 individuals, instead of facing the hearing and to clear their names, all of the 3 opted to resign. We want to indicate the following. The KPMG report was delivered to SARS late in 2015 and was made official and final to SARS as we received it on the 26th of January 2016. It therefore follows that the disciplinary hearing against the above were not conducted as a result of the KPMG report, but on the basis of the Sikhakhane report. We therefore want to indicate hence the assertion that those affected are mainly endeavoring to claim innocence or otherwise on the withdrawal of the KPMG report, with others claiming that their careers and careers are destroyed as a result of KPMG report, either are grossly ignorant or outright mischievous and or concerted by dismal attempt to mislead the South African public. We at the South African Revenue Services is calling upon those who are unfairly and justly accusing SARS of improper conduct on the basis of the KPMG report statement to desist from such conduct. I would like to indicate very briefly that the issue of this report and others border on what has been socialized in the public space, which KPMG in particular can confirm and attest. I have documents here that the Sunday evening activities which were reported, SARS has further observed another set of people who are trying too hard to claim that the purported withdrawal of the report by KPMG automatically vindicates them from their responsibility to account to the alleged criminal acts. SARS places on record that such malicious and irresponsible claims are either some acts of gross ignorance, but at worst, an attempt to circumvent the law or to mislead the public. I must state categorically clear here that in early May 2015, 2 employees voluntarily demanded to see the commissioner as they wanted to make full confession. The 2 employees informed the commissioner about the existence of an illegal and unlawful rogue unit. Included in the confession was that they were instructed by individuals in the organization to install cameras in 12 offices of both the Scorpions at the time. Further, that the purchase of the equipment was made through cash, 950,000 in cash, which was given to them by Mr. Gerinel and his colleagues. The two were advised by the Commissioner to confess to the police, which as far as SARS is concerned, they did. Then SARS sought legal opinion which advised that in terms of the prevention and combating of corrupt activities, as a person holding higher authority is legally obliged to open a criminal case, which SARS duly opened on May 2014. The case is in the hands of the Hawks, and SARS has, as a consequence, wanted the matter to be concluded as speedily as possible. As the above demonstrate, KPMG report was handed to SARS only late in 2015, and of course, we accepted the final version in 2016 January, as this simply demonstrates this was long after criminal cases were opened and all necessary evidence was provided to the Hawks and the SAPs. I would like to indicate to the members of the media that it is common cause to indicate that the Hawks did receive the report from KPMG, duly submitted to them for the purposes of the investigation. Given the above facts, SARS is left with no option but to conclude that those who are claiming exoneration for possible and alleged criminal offenses who are expected to be aware of these public facts can only be attempting to mislead South Africans, which SARS finds quite unfortunate. From this position, as SARS, the criminal cases whose details is outlined and is not in our hands is left with those institutions that are in the public domain, the police and others, to do so. SARS wishes to assure all South Africans, in particular taxpayers and traders, that the 14,000 men and women of SARS continue to work tirelessly and selflessly in ensuring that all revenue due to the state are collected both legally and efficiently, whilst protecting our borders and facilitating trade as we take South Africa forward together. I thank you.
Colleagues, that will be the statement that has been read by the Commissioner. We will then open for questions. I see, Karen, you are first on the starting block, so go ahead.
Commissioner Moyane, I'm just trying to clarify. You've accused KPMG of being part of what you've described as a treacherous agenda, but are you suggesting that they did something wrong in going public with what they say was clearly an irregular, unlawful report that had severe repercussions, certainly in the public sphere, in terms of the Sunday Times stories, the way in which people were portrayed, slandered, even what some people might say? Are you suggesting that they were wrong to go public and come and, many may argue, do the ethical thing in terms of saying actually this report was not legal or legally sound? You also suggesting you want legal action against them. Are you pursuing legal action on the basis that they did a very flawed and problematic investigation that, as I said before, had such profound consequences? Or are you seeking legal action on the basis that they went public with this and, as you put it, had an agenda, against SARS? And then on what basis do you say that KPMG has an agenda? Do you have any kind of solid evidence of that? My last point is this. The Sikhakhani investigation report, none of that evidence was under oath, sir, and Judge Kroon endorsed the findings, but essentially what he was doing was a documentary review. What do you think, is there like a real sound legal basis to say that those reports and investigations are indeed as legally unassailable as you would present them as? Thank you.
Okay, so that's fine. Let the lady behind share the mic first here. Will you introduce yourself? I'm sorry not to.
Antoinette Slavert from MoneyWeb. Commissioner Moyane, if KPMG gave you more time to respond to their email, what would you have done? Would you have interdicted them, or what would you have used that time for?
Go ahead, sir.
Graham Huskin from the Times Live. Commissioner, if you're so sure of the Sikhakhani report and the Kroon report,
Why then did you mandate KPMG to conduct a report into this, the alleged and now obviously not so alleged rogue unit? Yeah, if you can please answer me on that. Thank you.
Okay, so why don't we take the first three questions and then let the Commissioner respond to those.
Thanks, Karen. I've noted the various points that you have mentioned, unlawfulness, whether there's any agenda whatsoever. I think it is important to put and contextualize the matter very clearly. One, the Sekakane report is a result of media mumblings and rumblings that have been there prior to 2014 on the allegations of an existence of a rogue unit within SARS. 2014 became the prime time wherein these matters came to the head. And hence, the Minister then of Finance instructed the then acting Deputy Commissioner, who was acting Commissioner for SARS, to investigate the matter. Firstly, this was looked through by Kanyane report, which the Minister felt was inconclusive. It was further escalated when the Minister said, I would like to have a full understanding and appreciation of what Kanyane report had to say on these matters. Advocate Sekakane SC was charged with the responsibility to give a 45-day turnaround and provide a report as to verify and give veracity to the first report that was given to the ministry. It came to us on the 5th of November, while I had already taken the leadership and stewardship of this organization. On the 5th of November, the report was provided to myself. But it is also important to note the following. When I took over, I was asked as to whether I want to review the terms and conditions of the Sekakane report. I met the Sekakane. I said I had no mandate at the time because I would like what has been agreed upon to be concluded in the manner in which it has been agreed with the minister. So Advocate Sekakane and his team left with a clear understanding that the commissioner who had just joined the organization has no hand in order to change the terms and the conditions that had been agreed upon. The report was delivered as stated on the 5th of October in its entirety, all copies given to me, and the copies were also given to the minister. The report of Sekakane is a result of the concerns that were raised by the ministry, in particular, bordering on the image and the credibility of the organization. And it mentioned that there was prima facie evidence of wrongdoing and illegality of conducting and collecting information outside the purview of those agencies that have the right and the responsibility to do so. Now, in order to close this loop, it has to be mentioned here and confirmed here that that report was not Commissioner Moyane's report. It was the report that was conducted in the previous administration, which I inherited without contaminating or, due respect, I withdraw, without changing the terms and conditions. Mine was to convey that to the minister, and the minister in his wisdom, prior to his first and maiden MTBPS, appointed an advisory board that was led by a retired Judge Kroon. Amongst others, that committee, or the advisory committee, was to advise both the minister and the commissioner on some of the issues administrative that were taking place within SARS. I will not be able to answer on behalf of the judge, but the judge in his wisdom, given the position that he occupies and the code of ethics, having read and satisfied together with the team, came to the same conclusion and said they concur and agree with the contents of the report. that there was prima facie evidence of wrongdoing and illegality, especially the illegal establishment of the unit at SARS, which was conducting intelligence-driven activities without the prerequisite permission. Why am I claiming it's an agenda? My apology. We find it very strange as an administration that this report in particular, dated the 15th of September, amongst all other things, a period of slumber had taken place. The report was given to us, prepared in 2014, first on the 20, I can't remember the date, of January 2016, the report is given to us as final. A year and a half thereafter, the report is now considered as inconclusive, and if I recall here, which cannot be relied upon, we find it completely disingenuous, completely unethical, and borders in giving us a sense that the organization has failed to conduct its activity despite the terms and conditions for which this work was given to us in good faith. I have on record here the previous CEO sending us a report titled KPMG report with a letter accompanying it as final, which means one ought to have, in this instance, done all the quality assurance attested to. But to come down 1 year down the year, only single one report, and say the contents therefore cannot be relied upon, borders in creating a perception to the public that SARS is not an organization that you can trust, and therefore it casts aspersion to the leadership thereof. We find it very strange that all 7 gentlemen and ladies decided to leave on one single report. The question that begs to be answered: how many reports under their leadership, how many reports that they were able to be in charge of failed to stand the scrutiny of quality assurance? And to make things worse, as the commissioner for this organization, I find it very strange that there should be a nexus between us and other organizations that I mentioned there. And therefore, it is common cause for us to say, perhaps to respond to the second one that was raised, KPMG interdicted. We're not in the process of interdiction. They had already made their mind. Because supposing I was not in the office and I was out and I needed to do other things, we felt that we're dealing with a reputable organization that stands the scrutiny of being able to do their work professionally, and they are accountable for their work. At no point did we consider any interdiction of their work, but common cause would have dictated that had they had seen that there was flaws, there's sufficient time to come and have a discussion with us. And I want to confirm that when this matter was raised with me on Friday the 15th, I immediately passed the information to the Chief Officer Legal to look at the legal implications, and also called upon those who are responsible from an enforcement perspective as to what are the ramifications thereof. I also want to indicate, once I received this, I immediately informed the Minister of Finance of the seriousness and the nature of the contents, especially if you look at paragraph 3 that says the report which refers to conclusion, recommendations and legal opinions should no longer be relied upon. That is a very serious statement. And I also shared the same sentiments, same report with the Deputy Minister of Finance. And therefore we thought it is important and prudent that we also inform the state institutions, government institutions that are responsible for matters that have an impact on SARS as an institution. We informed SCOPA, hence we have Mr. Nyamezede Boy here. We informed SCOF, that we want this matter to be looked into. Because it is quite amazing for us and shocking, because a tax administration of a magnitude as SARS cannot be pushed into a situation wherein the reports that we are commissioned can be seen to be doubted upon, and we take action without full accountability. KPMG should be held accountable. KPMG must be accountable for all the things that they have written to us, which we have confirmed and accepted as a final report that we have accepted. And therefore, we have also on record, when the matter was now dealt with from a criminal perspective, the Hawks requested that this information be shared with them. And that was done with a thorough and thorough process of all the processes being followed. The former CEO was given a letter, and he complied and gave the report to the investigating authorities. As to how they are going to deal with this matter is no longer in our hands. But I want to indicate that at no point were we intending to interdict, but we found that the speed with which they acted to go and make a statement without giving us an authority, this thing I don't think happened overnight on Thursday night, Friday morning, when they were announcing new leadership into that organ. They knew about this. They should have come to us earlier. My point as the accounting authority, much as I received this letter, I did what is expected from me, not to be derelict of my responsibility with malicious intent, to take this matter with the seriousness that it has to legal for scrutiny, for assessment. And for them on the morning to give us a letter and 2 hours later, it's unacceptable. It is important, therefore, that South Africans should understand that when you occupy positions of leadership, you have the responsibility to take full accountability of what you are responsible for. And therefore, would be interested to see as the course of action that they're taking. And therefore, that is why we have elected to inform all relevant parties to deal with the matters that are at hand. Now, it is Times Media. I should think it's Times Media. Why mandate KPMG? Is that the question? Any person who occupies a position of authority and responsibility and taking cognizance of the seriousness of the issues that have been shared with him, at times you want to have what you call second opinion, a second bite, and have a sense as to the trajectory and the reports that you have been properly attested to. We did that mindful of the fact that we gave them all the reports in order for them to have an independent opinion and assessment without due influence of the leadership. I'm saying this because they had the ability to access the individual's computers, mirror image, look at their content and communication, and therefore give us as to whether indeed was there prima facie evidence of wrongdoing. I'll take a pause there.
Okay, let's take the next round of questions. Please do introduce yourself, ma'am, at the back. We will come back. Let's give the others. I apologize for not knowing your name. But, go ahead.
It's Olivia Palaitile from Jacaranda FM. Commissioner, I just want to ask, who do you think is behind this agenda that you are suggesting might be there?
Okay. The lady next to you. No, go ahead. You have a mic. She will come after you.
Natasha from the Business Day. Commissioner, all the investigations into this unit so far have been quite tainted. We know that the Sunday Times reports, many of them have been corrected, publicly corrected. We know that the Kruan Committee simply endorsed the Sikakani report, and it was also revealed that a member of the Kruan Committee had actually sought to leak damaging information on SARS to newspapers. Now the KPMG report has been discredited. If we go back to the Sikakani report, the recommendation was for a judicial commission of inquiry. And that was actually the recommendation from Sikakani, which you now seem to be relying on. Why has SARS never pursued that route? And do you think you will be pursuing it now since this terrain is so tainted on both sides? Thank you.
Ma'am, you can go ahead.
Okay, I'm Lamise Umarji from Fin24. Commissioner, you've mentioned that this is an attempt to attack SARS, and last week in Parliament you also said that your life had been in danger, and I'd just like you to confirm that and for you to explain to what end are people trying to attack the institution.
Okay. The one last hand? You're taking a second bite, so let me have the Commissioner answer. We'll come back to everyone.
Honorable members of the media present here. There's one thing that is sacrosanct, the sovereignty of the state and the institution that we defend. SARS forms part of that nexus. Any form of negative media has a very serious impact. One, create uncertainty, instability, and people feel that we have an institution that is unable to run its affairs. Let me respond to who is behind the agenda. I don't have a particular name or persons. An agenda can be as broad as anything, depending as to how those who have studied English on the nature of what the agenda means. But the agenda here, Ms. Pillay, am I right? Is that the agenda is very clear to cast aspersion. I find it very strange that we are being asked of an agenda. The agenda is that there has been, and we continue and wait for the requisite authorities in government to conclude their part and their section in the investigation that is taking place as to what is really behind this. Who is behind this? I do not have the skills, the requisite skills within SARS to be doing what is called agenda searching processes or capability in intelligence to look into agendas. Mine is a capability of creating a team that is strong of collecting all revenue due and creating a climate wherein all South Africans can have the belief and trust in this august organization that for years has stood tall and be able to comply and collect all revenue due. It will be my duty, therefore, to defend all the 14 or 15,000 men and women of SARS who, at all material time beyond the call of duty, work very hard to create this environment. At no point have we failed the South Africans. And we are very grateful that we can report to the stakeholders and all taxpayers that we do our work openly without fear or favor, and we treat all taxpayers without any favor whatsoever. And therefore, the question of agenda, I'm very much loath to respond to. I'm not sure what agenda is, but I see there's a hand that says you should not trust that institution. And by so doing, by creating and casting aspersion, you are creating an atmosphere wherein people should look at the organization with a different eye altogether. And we therefore believe that it is important that we come out very clearly, unambiguously so, openly so, that we're doing our work in the manner that is within the parameters of the law. Any other issue that is outside the law would not be able to do. Natasha? What happened is that when the Sikhakhane report was given to us in 2014, November, the report was given to both the minister and the deputy minister because they were the custodian, including SARS, to be able to understand what the contents of the report were all about, as interested parties to understand that they are responsible for an institution wherein these serious allegations were being directed to. And therefore, I want to believe that in the discussion that I had with both the minister and the deputy minister, there was great concern that if these things are happening within SARS, therefore they need to be rooted out. And I need to put on record that once these issues were made, I called a press conference. I said, that unit is disbanded. I think if we call back, we can recall. I said, if that unit does exist within SARS, it must cease to exist, and the individuals who might be in that must surface and they must debriefed so they can do the correct work that is expected of taxpayers and tax administration, which is their responsibility. Fin 24? Yes. Ma'am, I want to indicate that it is of great concern if you are sitting in an organization and occupying a position and being asked a question in Parliament wherein I'm being told that they knew my movements. And I want to repeat this. That question arises out of the question that was raised in the previous year, wherein one member of the Parliament said, I went to Paris to attend a meeting. I refused to stay in that hotel, wasted taxpayers' money. I chose a different hotel. On record, the SARS Commissioner, records will confirm, did not change any hotel. A hotel that is allocated to me, I go and stay there in accordance to the levels and the decisions that have been taken by procurement. So that's the first lie. And therefore perpetuate a lie that the Commissioner is living on bling. He wants to do things the way he wants. Strange enough, on that very issue, I took very serious exception to it. That is why I made an extensive explanation in the portfolio of finance last week, Wednesday. I was to chair a meeting the following day, despite the fact that I did not leave that hotel. I stayed in that hotel. I became seriously ill, to a point in the South African High Commissioner in Paris had to find an urgent doctor to attend to my illness. I was going to chair a meeting. And one wonders as to what could have happened. And certainly, I can confirm here, there has been, of course, very funny phone calls that one receives. So you never know as to whether one's life is at stake, I'm watched, and such questions for me, they're a cause for concern. And they create a situation of distress, but certainly, I'm saying I take everything as it comes to me as a leader, to lead from the front and do what is expected of me. Thank you.
Right. That's that. Mr. Boy, want to add?
Yeah, no, what I wanted to say is we thank the opportunity that SARS is providing for us to be able to go down to the bottom of what has been said. We quite clearly take a serious exception to the way KPMG has handled this particular matter. These are taxpayers' money. It's not their money, as you always say, that it is in the interest of South Africans that we know how deep in this, KPMG play a particular role. KPMG on its own goes into Treasury. As we're dealing with the IFMS report, KPMG was involved. As we're dealing with the South African Airways, KPMG was involved. As we deal with the South African Express, KPMG was involved. So our interest as SCOPA has always been to look at why would the taxpayers' money be wasted and not being able to be accounted for. So we thank this opportunity to be able to express that we will be going deeper into the matter itself, and we will be challenging KPMG from a parliamentary point of view of how far they think their own decision is not so costly and doesn't cost us and the sovereignty of South Africa in the way they've conducted themselves. So as a parliamentary committee, listening to the different views that they are expressing, we'll definitely be going more deeper to understand what does that report imply? Because it's not, it can't be KPMG's own decision to say it cost us 63 million and this is what we're going to do. The part that more and more concerns us is that they've been playing quite a lot of significant role with the Auditor General when it comes to the different reports that we have to receive and report about that involve KPMG. And that matter, as I'm talking to you now, it is in front of us, and we're going to be processing it. But it's a matter of interest to South Africans to know that how far is their taxpayers' money being wasted. And it can be the decision of KPMG and SARS, only that in their own engagement, they can come to a conclusion. As an institution that is constitutionally emboldened to be able to look after the taxpayers' money, we'll definitely be following up on the matter itself.
Okay, I've just gotten an indication that I need to take the last round, so we'll start up front here. May have to be more than 3 questions there. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm from Bloomberg. Allow me to quote very quickly. There are 2 things here. Firstly, the whole conspiracy theory of replacing good people with bad to facilitate state capture. SARS became a political project, and it is now run by people who have no idea how to manage a tax administration system. They don't know what skills are needed and how to use them. That is, quote, a letter from the former finance minister, and a man that you may have been at loggerheads with previously, former finance minister Pravin Gordhan. I'd like to get your thoughts, Commissioner, on that point.
Okay, let's go. Miriam, it's to you. Oh.
Thank you. I don't think this is working anymore.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. Just to clarify, because I think this is very important. Do you, as the Commissioner of SARS, acknowledge that that report is problematic and has no basis in evidence? Because your unhappiness seems to lie in the fact that there's been this public repudiation by KPMG of that report. But you, as the Commissioner, Tom Moyane, do you accept that that report is flawed and cannot be used as evidence about the so-called rogue unit? Do you accept that, or do you still believe that there's a basis, that that report has evidence in it, and that this, because your suggestion seems to be that this is, the repudiation of it is a political act, not one driven by the legal implications or the legal problems. So I just want clarity on that. And then second of all, the Minister of Finance indicated to me that he was going to meet with you about those publicized reports of the Gupta family not being taxed at all over a period between 2011 and I think 2013. I know you can't go into people's personal details, but have you had a meeting with the Minister over that, and have you been able to reach some kind of agreement about that situation? Thank you.
Okay, so Karen, can I quickly say that the last part of your question we're not going to answer?
Why not?
No, because
the Minister of Finance has publicly spoken about this. And it's an issue.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm sure the Minister of Finance has a right to say that, but to the extent that this matter, it relates to a specific taxpayer, I think we must then say that SARS can't then comment on that specifically. So
I'm not asking you to comment. I'm saying, has there been such a meeting and has the situation been resolved?
No, that's fine.
Not a comment on a taxpayer. The Minister of Finance went public with that. We just seek clarification on whether that meeting happened.
That's fine. Let's have that next question at the back here.
Commissioner, you're talking about instituting legal proceedings against KPMG for reputational damage, including but not limited to a civil claim. Have you quantified that claim yet? And what other legal proceedings are you planning, and how far is the process?
Commissioner Graham Hoskin again from the Times. The second Sekane report, was mandated to investigate a complaint against Mr. van Lockenberg stemming from Belinda Walters, and was then unilaterally expanded to include the so-called rogue unit. Given that the alleged rogue unit members were never themselves questioned, you know, was that a concern for you that they weren't questioned, that they didn't get their side of the story, as well as the Kroon report? I mean, they were never questioned during that. Surely that should have been concern to you. And I understand that you wanted a second legal opinion. Hence you went to KPMG. But given that you were so assured of the report by a judge and that, as you've indicated, was it really necessary, or did you have any doubts over the Kroon and Sekhukhane report? And then also, in terms of the KPMG report, we see a number of their findings were actually a copy and paste of SARS' own legal report. I mean, this has been reported by the Daily Maverick, a couple of other media organizations quite extensively. Surely if there was concerns over KPMG's report, there should be concerns over your own legal advisory from around what the so-called SARS rogue unit allegedly did. Thank you.
I mean, the last person that I'm going to ask the question here.
Okay, thank you. Nomo Sapungula from ANN7. Commissioner, I just want to find out, will this withdrawal have a legal impact on the investigations in the SARS rogue units? What is the advice that you have gotten from your legal team, if there is any? And secondly, what I'd like to find out is there anything on record from the 3 reports that suggest that the former Commissioner, Pravin Gordhan, should have known about the illegal activities conducted by the so-called rogue units? As per the procedures of SARS, how should this ignorance of illegalities be seen as? Is this a case of innocent lack of oversight or a serious breach of obligations?
Commissioner, that's the last batch of questions. Please do answer those.
Thanks, Program Director. Bloomberg, you quoted extensively. I don't have the capacity to recall verbatim what you said, but what I noted here, it says SARS has employed people who have no idea, who have no experience, no IT experience. It goes on and on and on. May I put it on record here that if we speak of IT capability, I have here in front of South Africans Miss Mamate Makheche Mokwane, who is a nominee of the MTN IT Awards for 2017 in the category of leadership. Then the question that begs to be answered, are we saying that she has no capability? She has no experience in IT. I'll not delve into answering questions that I have no sense of as to how they are derived at, by whomsoever has made that statement. All I can tell you is that if SARS did not have the capability and the skills, the question that begs is that, please let's go back to our track record. From the time that we took stewardship of this organization, it has been an upward trajectory. We have collected revenue, met the target, surpassed the target, and we are proud of the work that we have. So I don't see the narrative or the statement as substantive as it may seek to be, to fulfill that which it seeks to portray us to be. We have men and women who are capable, men and women who are running this institution, men and women who have all the experience to run a tax administration. And therefore, the question simply put is that that statement lacks substance. We have people who can do so. And therefore, I would not like to entertain that question further than it does. It doesn't meet that does not stand the test of what we have been able to. Had we not had the quality of the leadership that it attached doesn't, SARS would have completely fallen between the cracks. Perhaps what begs to be answered here is, do we have to choose a certain criteria of people that suits a certain profile? Or we we appoint people according to the qualities and that which they bring into the organization. The other issue that is raised here is that, is the report problematic? I want to say the report by KPMG is not flawed. In fact, the report that from KPMG confirms conclusively, deeply so, that there's prima facie, I'm not sure whether there's two words, prima facie, a double wrongdoing in this organization. That there were people who were involved in real serious problems that are not tax related. So I didn't find the report as flawed. On the contrary, when the report was given to us, it gave one goosebumps that what Sikakane had unearthed is just a tip of the iceberg. That is why the Hawks requested us for the copy of the report, which we duly followed the process, and that is why the investigation is continuing. I would like to concur with the program director, Mr. Hlengane Mathebula, when he says, we're not here to talk about taxpayers. And I want to say it as the Commissioner for the Southern Revenue Services to the media houses that kindly refrain from drawing us to speaking about taxpayers' information. The Tax Administration Act prohibits us that we should talking about taxpayers' information in the public space. It is criminal. Chapter 6.
Sir, I'm not asking you to comment on the British personal details. I'm asking you to confirm whether you have met with the Minister of Finance.
Now, I'm coming to that. Don't be too upset, and also give me the time. And I want to say, every time I have an interview with you, you seem to have an upset aptitude.
Can you hold it? So I think let's do this, Karen. One of the things that we do is that we give an opportunity to ask questions, we respond. No, but we can't. But we can't have this. And so let's just agree on one thing. We can't have this. So what I was trying to avoid is a dialogue that's not going to be useful. So let's get the Commissioner to answer the question in its entirety. And if there is really strong need for us to be able to entertain that, let's do that. But let's do it in a manner that all of us are able to respect each other. All the questions asked are as crucial and important, and I'm sure South African public wants to hear the answers to those. And where the mistakes has been made or not been answered correctly, we need to clarify that. That's all I'm asking for.
Simply put, Program Director, Mr. Mathebula, and to all South Africans listening, the Commissioner for the South African Revenue Service does not discuss taxpayers' matters with the Minister. I have no right to discuss taxpayers' matters with the Minister. So that question does not arise. I just wanted to give you a chronology of events. The Minister and I, in whatever meeting, in whatever form, he may want to ask something about so-and-so, I will not answer. And he knows he will not ask me about taxpayers, because there is Chapter 6 of the Tax Administration Act, which precludes any discussion of taxpayer information with any other, including the Minister. The other question that is going to be answered by my colleague here, Ms. Mokoena, is legal proceedings. I would like to defer to her, please.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. The question is SARS considering legal proceedings? And if so, has SARS quantified the damages, and how far is the process? The answer is yes, we are considering taking legal proceedings regarding this. You will, As you are aware, there is a service level agreement entered into between SARS and KPMG that outlines the rights and obligations of both parties. Considering the statement that the KPMG has made this past Friday, we want to find out if our rights have been infringed, and if so, to what extent, and what will the nature of our remedies, if any, will be against KPMG. As the Commissioner has read the letter from the attorneys of KPMG, you will note that at no stage did KPMG say they are withdrawing their report. If I were to quote verbatim, the statement says, having noted that the internal controls of KPMG were not adhered to, therefore, those parts of the report that relate to the conclusions, the findings, and recommendations may no longer be relied to. That then calls for us to seek legal opinion as to the status of the report is, considering that only 3 parts of the report are now being surveyed. That on its own calls for legal opinion. We have our own views, but we'll have to engage the services of our council. This statement was announced on Friday. We have not had the opportunity to consult with our legal team. We'll be doing so, and that will be imminent. As to the quantification, in this instance, we cannot quantify. There are issues of reputational harm that we are considering. There are issues of breach of the service level agreement, if any. And of course, as you have read, there is those terms and conditions which are material in our view that state that once the report was accepted by SARS as final on the 6th of January 2016, then all the intellectual property in that report belongs to SARS. That KPMG could have communicated parts of that report unilaterally without consulting with SARS, as we've demonstrated, calls also for legal opinion on those issues. Thank you.
So whilst Ms. Mkwana just finished that, can I just read to you an email from Nkubeko Sbiya, communication specialist from KPMG. Could you please forward this message as recommended? We will appreciate it if SARS during the press conference can clarify the following. 1. Contrary to the media reports, KPMG has not retracted the SARS report in its entirety. Please read our statement again. Given the failure, that's in quotation marks, given the failure to appropriately apply our own risk management and quality controls, that part of the report which refers to the conclusions, recommendations, and legal opinions should no longer be relied upon, close quotes. So that's a text that has just come in from KPMG. Commissioner, can you conclude the other parts of your question so that we can bring the conference to an end?
Thanks, Hlengani. Thank you very much for bringing that technology at its highest level. And we appreciate that you have the technology and the skill to meander through those. Graham from the Times, JVL Walters. With due respect, I would not like to get into this matter because it's a matter that is taking its legal course. And therefore, for me to be drawn into that would be disingenuous and incorrect for me to comment on something that, from a legal perspective, I will not be able to respond to. And I'll be most grateful if my response is acceptable to you and wait for the authorities that are dealing with this matter to address it appropriately. As and when perhaps SARS is drawn into it and we need to respond, certainly our legal team will be able to advise how best to deal with it. The Krohn report, yes. Krohn was appointed by the minister in accordance to the SARS Act, and the responsibility is therefore and the veracity and authenticity of confirming that which they have been able to apply their mind for gave management what you call the courage and the confidence that that which we have before us is something that we can rely upon and use as an instrument for a process of the investigation and disciplinary processes that we took. What I do not agree with, perhaps that's KPMG's prerogative to respond to. You allege, if I'm wrong, correct me, that you think that part of it was cut and paste. I'm not sure. We as SARS, when we contract anybody, it is their duty to do the best that they can. And if cut and paste is what you have found, then it's just lamentable that an organization of this stature should resort to such poor standards of cut and paste without looking at the merits and the demerits or the damage potential that might emanate from poor quality work. If there's cut and paste, then there is a problem.
You see?
No, let me finish.
You see, can we be consistent? You know, it can't be that I ask Karen not to do this and Graham, you do the same. It can't be. And colleagues, maybe it's a long time since I chaired the press conference and I'm a little bit rusty. But can the commissioner conclude? Yes. And I'm really kind of very happy to, in the instance where there is really those aspects that we need to further clarify, that we do so. But it can't be that we intervene, thereby missing the essence of what is being said. I'm really just appealing for that.
From a colleague, journalist from AN7, 3 questions. SARS rogue unit, that is under investigation. We can confirm from the reports that we have, and would like to stand by the reports that we have as management, that there is prima facie evidence that the unit existed until I disbanded it. Whether it has disbanded, but the fact of the matter is that once that came to my attention, I took the right decision to disband it. And I can confirm that the members of that unit were surfaced. And of course, they had to go through a process of debriefing and being brought back into the organization. The issue you spoke about, Minister Pravin Gordhan, what was the question?